Chapter 1. Here's a piece of breaking news. Our country's famous bartender and wine-tasting master, Mr. Li, fell into a coma due to his obsession with fine wine. He tasted a recently unearthed fine wine from the Han Dynasty and passed away after 72 hours of treatment. He was 32 years old. Mr. Li was the best bartender and wine-tasting master in our country and even in the world. He won the Fidelity International Bartender Competition 5 times in a row and was the honorary president of the International Bartender Union. He was also the honorary director of the International Wine Tasting Association, the only winner of the International 6-Star Emperor Diamond Medal, the creator of the 6 Senses tasting method, and the world's #1 god of wine. Mr. Li's achievements in his short 32 years of life were unprecedented. According to a friend of Mr. Li took the risk to taste all the fine wines in the world. He tasted the unblended fine wine from the Han Dynasty and fell into a coma. Mr. Li's death is a great loss to the world's bartending and wine-tasting world. Up until now, 37 countries' wine associations have sent their condolences. 5 Elements continent, west of the Southern Fire Empire, Fire City. In the Southern Fire Empire, Fire City was only a medium-sized city, but it was quite prosperous in all aspects. There were only 2,000 soldiers stationed here, but the security here was surprisingly good. The wide streets were spotless, and all the main roads were paved with dark red granite, unique to the Southern Fire Empire. Using this kind of rock to pave the roads was not only beautiful but also durable. As long as no one destroyed it, it could be used for hundreds of years without a problem. It was already evening, and the setting sun left behind a beautiful glow on the horizon. Flamehaven City had become more and more peaceful. After a day of work, people who weren't too busy began to rest, and various places of entertainment that were suitable for the evening were bustling with activity. The Flaming Bar, Burning Passion, was one of the most famous bars in Fire City. It was located on the side of the main road in a prime location. Its main color was red like most of the buildings in Fire City, but its red was brighter. The tall 2-story building was not its biggest selling point. What attracted customers the most was the open-air plaza in front of the bar. The open-air plaza was about 500 square meters in size. In the middle was a circular bar counter with a diameter of 10 meters. The most famous bartenders of the Flaming Bar would mix drinks for the customers here every night. Even on rainy days, there was never a lack of customers. The canopy that could be pulled up at any time was more than enough to cover the entire open-air plaza. There was no winter in the Southern Fire Empire, so the nights here were never cold. At this time, the bartenders of the Flaming Bar, Burning Emotions, were already in position. The number of customers in the open-air plaza had also gradually increased. For them, this was the busiest time of the day. An old man wearing a red robe walked into the open-air plaza. As soon as he stepped into the area, a waiter immediately welcomed him with a face full of smiles. He led him to the center of the open-air plaza, closest to the bar counter. The 10 tables surrounding the bar counter were not for ordinary customers. They were all reserved for the bar's VIPs. Without a doubt, this old man in red robe was one of them. Moreover, his seat was facing the street. It was the Jia table here. The old man in red robe had a head full of white short hair. He had a rosacea nose, small eyes, and a short stature. No matter how you looked at him, he was the kind of person that was very inconspicuous. However, when his small eyes occasionally opened and closed, a faint red glow would flash through them. "Yang, are you still the same as before?" A middle-aged man in formal attire walked over and gracefully bowed to the old man in red robe. Only the customers at the VIP tables could be personally received by this bar owner. Yang said helplessly, "Other than your specialty Flaming Bar, Burning Passion, which has a bit of flavor, there's nothing else that can attract me." The bar owner smiled slightly and said, "Please wait a moment." As he spoke, He turned to the oldest bartender behind the bar counter and snapped his fingers. The bartender immediately understood. He took out a clean crystal flask and quickly began his first job of the day. It was also the most important job for him every day. Soon, the various liquors were poured into the flask in order. After placing the strainer and covering the lid, the flask immediately danced happily in the bartender's hands. As the flask was made of a transparent white crystal, the color of the liquor inside could be clearly seen during the mixing process. As the bartender quickly and skillfully shook the flask, the red liquor in the flask danced up and down like a cluster of flames. It was a very beautiful sight. When the cluster of flames finally calmed down in the bartender's hands, the flask's lid had already been opened. The bartender poured the dark red liquor into a martini glass and shook it over the lamp beside him. Instantly, a faint red flame ignited above the liquor, and the rich and spicy smell of the liquor wafted into the air. The smooth movements of the senior bartender of the Flaming Bar, as well as the aroma of the special Flaming Bar's burning passion cocktail, immediately won the applause and smiles of the nearby customers. Yang was no exception. He nodded at the bartender, and when his gaze fell on the glass of liquor, his small eyes couldn't help but reveal an impatient expression. Soon, the glass of fine liquor was delivered to Yang. He directly took the glass from the waiter's hand and took a sip, completely ignoring the burning flames on the liquor. He let out a long breath and praised the bar owner. Good, the Flaming Bar's burning passion cocktail is still the best. After drinking it for 5 years, this old drunkard still enjoys it so much that he forgets to leave. No wonder your business is so good. The bar owner smiled respectfully and said, "As long as you're satisfied." At this moment, a discordant voice suddenly sounded from the side. "You call this good liquor? It's just trash." The voice wasn't loud, and it was slightly hoarse and weak. However, it couldn't conceal the arrogance in the voice. The bar owner and Yang looked in the direction of the voice at almost the same time. They didn't know when, but they saw a skinny little beggar in tattered clothes squatting not far from the table. His gaze was focused on the Flaming Bar's burning passion cocktail, and his dull eyes were filled with disdain. The bar owner frowned slightly and looked sternly at a waiter not far away. Only then did the waiter notice the little beggar's presence, and quickly ran over. "I'm sorry, boss, I didn't see him come in." The bar owner waved his hand and gestured for the waiter to quickly drag the little beggar out to prevent him from affecting his business. He couldn't be too overbearing in front of Yang. The little beggar stood up on his own. His face was dirty and he was skinny. He looked to be only 11 or 12 years old. His messy hair hadn't been washed for God knows how many days, and his body inevitably had an unpleasant smell. The waiter came over in disgust and was about to drag him out, but Yang said, "Wait." Without the bar owner's signal, the waiter quickly withdrew his hand and hesitantly looked at Yang. Yang's gaze fell on the little beggar and said, "Little friend, you said that this Flaming Bar's burning passion cocktail isn't good? I don't know where you've seen better liquor, tell me about it." Pursuing good liquor could be said to be one of the greatest interests in his life. The bar owner hurriedly said, "Yang, what can a little beggar like him know? Don't let him spoil your mood." The people of the Southern Fire Empire loved drinking the most, so the competition in the bar industry was naturally very fierce. The bar owner was really afraid that the little beggar in front of him would say what good liquor was in other bars in the city and attract this distinguished guest away. One had to know that Yang came here every day to drink, and it wasn't just a matter of how much income he brought in. Yang glanced at him. How could he not understand the bar owner's thoughts? He smiled and said, "No problem, little friend. Tell me what good suggestion you have. If you're right, this gold coin is yours." Without anyone seeing what he did, a shining gold coin had already landed on the table. One had to know that the most famous Flaming Bar's burning passion cocktail only cost 1 gold coin. This gold coin was enough to feed a family of 3 in Fire City for a month. However, what was surprising was that the little beggar didn't even look at the gold coin. He pointed at the center of the bar and said proudly, "If you want to drink a real flaming bar's burning passion cocktail, take me there and give me the ingredients I need." "You know how to mix drinks?" the bar owner and elder Yang asked in unison. The waiters beside them were already chuckling in disdain. One had to know that bartending was a very popular occupation in the Southern Fire Empire, but how could one become an outstanding bartender without the accumulation of time? The words of this little beggar could only make them feel like he was talking nonsense. "That's right," Elder Yang said. Yang's expression became serious and said, "Little friend, honesty is the most important virtue in life. Do you understand?" At this moment the bar owner was relieved. In his heart, this little beggar in front of him was just a bragging little beggar. He wasn't an actor from another bar. The little beggar put his hands behind his back and said coldly, "Why don't you let the facts speak for themselves?" Yang frowned and said, "Can you really make a cocktail that's better than this flaming bar's burning passion cocktail?" A flash of anger flashed in the little beggar's eyes and he said loudly, "If I can't, I'll give my life to you." Looking at the anger in the little beggar's eyes, Yang was surprised to feel an unquestionable strong confidence and unquestionable pride from this little beggar. This was clearly just a beggar at the bottom of society. Where did his confidence come from? At this moment, everything that happened here had already attracted the attention of many people. The little beggar's words also attracted the interest of many customers. There were already people shouting for him to try. The bar owner recovered his elegance and bent down. He lowered his head and whispered in Yang's ear, "Then let him try." Yang nodded slightly and said to the little beggar, "I hope you can surprise me. Boss Zhao, give him the ingredients he needs. I'll pay for it." Boss Zhao smiled and said, "I don't need much. How can I let you pay for it?" He waved his hand and gestured for the waiter to bring the little beggar over. Hearing their words, the little beggar didn't even stay for a second. He turned around and walked towards the center of the bar. The bartenders at the bar naturally weren't worried that this child who suddenly appeared out of nowhere would be a threat to them. They all looked at him with interest and made way for a workbench with various tools. The bartender who made the flaming bar's burning passion cocktail smiled mockingly and said, "Little friend, do you need me to introduce you to the drinks here?" As he said that, he pointed at the wine cabinet behind the bar that had hundreds of bottles of all kinds of fine alcohol. Another young bartender curled his lips and said in a strange tone, "Now even beggars dare to say that they know how to mix drinks. I really don't know what the boss is thinking. He actually let him come here. Isn't he afraid that he'll dirty the bar?" The older bartender glanced at him and said in a low voice, "Don't talk so much. Can't you see that Yang is interested in this kid? Otherwise, do you think the boss would let him in?" The little beggar didn't seem to hear anything. He didn't even look at them. Although he was small and skinny, at this moment, his back was straight. The arrogance in his eyes grew stronger, and there was even a hint of passion in them. He didn't even turn his head as he stated his requirement. 1 portion of tomato juice, 1 portion of freshly squeezed lemon juice, 1 portion of Worcester sauce, 1 portion of Tabasco chili oil, and also salt and pepper. The young bartender from before couldn't help but ask, "Do you want to cook or mix drinks?" At this moment, Boss Zhao and Yang walked to the center of the bar. Boss Zhao's face darkened when he heard that. Just do as he says. He doesn't have any rules at all. The young bartender was still unwilling to give up and said, "Let's see how this little beggar makes a fool of himself later." Then, he turned around and left. Regarding all of this, the little beggar still didn't seem to hear anything. He turned around and walked to the sink that was specially set up for the center of the bar to wash his hands. He washed very seriously. First, he wet his dirt-covered hands with water. Then, he applied hand sanitizer to his hands and rubbed them together. Then, he carefully washed his fingers one by one. Whether it was the gap between his fingers or his fingernails, he cleaned them meticulously. Even his wrists were not spared. His clean hands formed a sharp contrast with his dirty little face. The middle-aged bartender who brought out the flaming bar's burning passion showed a trace of astonishment at first. Then, his astonishment gradually turned into seriousness and seriousness. He nodded slowly as he watched the little beggar's movements. As a bartender, not only did he have to be completely focused during the process of mixing drinks, but he also had to respect his own drink. This was not only a form of respect for his customers, but also for himself. He saw a trace of sincerity in the corner of the little beggar's eyes. It was obvious that the little beggar really hadn't been listening to his side of the conversation. Instead, he had put all of his body and mind into the mixing of drink. Even if it was the bartender, it would be difficult to do so if he didn't deliberately do it. However, this child in front of him, who was only 11 or 12 years old, and a beggar at that, seemed to be doing it naturally. When he washed his hands, there was no delay in each step. It was as if he had done this all year round. His expression was also not fake. Occasionally, he raised his head to look at the drinks on the wine rack. His eyes were filled with sincerity and passion. Details determined success or failure. The middle-aged bartender, who was also a bartender, could see many things from the simple process of washing his hands. A trace of a smile also appeared on Yang's face. He muttered to himself, "Interesting." After washing his hands, the little beggar took a bottle of wine from the wine cabinet. The position of the bottle was just enough for his height to reach. When he turned around and returned to the bar, the ingredients he wanted had already been delivered. It was obvious how long he had spent washing his hands. The middle-aged bartender took the initiative to pass a clean, polished crystal flask to the little beggar. The little beggar opened the flask and took out the filter. His eyes revealed a moment of absent-mindedness, as if he was recalling something. The bar was already surrounded by customers. They all wanted to see how far this little beggar could go. At this moment, the little beggar had already picked up the bottle of wine in front of him and poured it into the flask. Chapter 2. The clear white liquid was poured into the shaker. The little beggar's hands were slightly trembling and unstable. Fortunately, no liquid spilled out of the shaker. Yang, Boss Zhao, and the bartenders all knew that the little beggar had chosen a bottle called Vipolo. It was a very strong and pure wine. The so-called pure wine lacked fragrance and was pure and sweet. It was very common to use it as the base of cocktails. Through the transparent crystal shaker, it could be seen that the little beggar had poured about 3/10 of the shaker's capacity. After that, it was 6/10 of tomato juice, 1/10 of freshly squeezed lemon juice, and the last 1/10. The little beggar quickly added his Worcestershire sauce, Tabasco chili oil, salt, and pepper according to a certain ratio. After adding these spices, the little beggar picked up the strainer with a faint look of helplessness on his face. However, he still put it into the shaker and sighed in his heart. It had been a long time since he had used this thing, but he had to use it now. The little beggar put the lid back on the shaker and held it in his hand. After all, his hands couldn't be compared to an adult's, so it was a bit strenuous for him to hold the shaker. This made those who didn't think highly of him snort. As everyone knew, the cocktail recipe was the most important thing when mixing drinks, followed by the technique. The ingredients that the little beggar had put into the shaker were really incomprehensible. As for the technique, looking at his shaky and pitifully small hands, it didn't seem like he had any ability. However, under the situation where no one thought that he would succeed, the little beggar's hands moved. He simply weighed the shaker in his hands and took half a step back. At that moment, his eyes were like two stars. He put his left hand behind his back and lifted the crystal shaker with his right hand. Suddenly, he opened his fingers and pressed his palm against the shaker. The crystal shaker suddenly spun like a top in his palm. The little beggar slowly raised his right hand, but the wine jug continued to spin at high speed in his palm. It was as if his palm had a suction force. Because of the large amount of tomato juice, The wine inside had been completely dyed red. As the wine jug spun rapidly, it was as if he was holding a red disc in his palm. Sounds of surprise rose one after another. Obviously, this little beggar wasn't as simple as most people thought. What was even more strange was that the little beggar's hand that was holding the shaker gradually straightened, and the shaker that was constantly spinning also straightened. However, it still stuck close to his palm and spun rapidly, without any signs of falling. He slowly raised his right arm from the right side of his body, with his palm facing forward. The wine jug rotated at high speed from right to left, from low to high and back to low again. It was like the sun moving from morning to noon and then back to night. During this process, the wine jug was still rotating vertically on his palm. None of the bartenders present could do this. They had never even seen it before. The young bartender who had mocked the little beggar earlier had his eyes wide open, staring at the red disk that resembled the sun. But he couldn't see how the little beggar did it. The only person present who could see how the little beggar did it was Yang. With his sharp eyes, he discovered that the little beggar's palm wasn't just moving with his arm. The little beggar's body was also moving, but the extent of the movement was very small. His palm was constantly adjusting, contracting, and straightening. His 5 fingers were like waves, rhythmically shaking. Every time, they would precisely touch the crystal shaker in the correct order. This was the secret to how he could keep the shaker spinning and always stick to his palm. However, it was easier said than done. Even if he messed up his rhythm a little, the wine jug would immediately fall from his hands. The little beggar's movements were slightly shaky, but to be able to persist and do this, for a child who was only 11 or 12 years old, was already very difficult. Just when everyone thought that the little beggar's mixing was going to end in such a dazzling way, suddenly, the little beggar's left hand, which he had previously hidden behind his back, also stretched out. The shaker in his right hand was thrown into the air as it spun at high speed. It was as if the sun had fallen, instantly causing the customers to cry out in surprise. However, the little beggar's expression didn't change at all. His 2 hands seemed to have suddenly disappeared, and only a faint shadow could be seen. This time, even Yang couldn't see it clearly. Everyone only saw a blur in front of their eyes. The fallen sun had risen again, and in an instant, they were shocked to see 3 suns. That's right, there were 3. Just when everyone thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them, there was a soft bang, and the shaker had fallen back onto the table. The little beggar wasn't in a hurry to open the shaker. His gaze swept across the faces of the people around him. Seeing how they were stunned by his 3 suns reflect the moon, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and the pride in his eyes seemed to grow. Only the sweat on his forehead showed that it wasn't easy for him to accomplish this. He didn't wipe his sweat, because he didn't want to dirty his hands. He naturally and elegantly twisted the lid of the shaker, and poured the slightly viscous blood-red liquid into a martini glass, not a drop more or less, leaving just the edge of the glass. He placed his right thumb vertically on the inside of the glass, and his index finger circled around the outside. With an impeccable posture, he passed the cocktail to Yang. From the looks of it, this glass of wine didn't seem as dazzling as the flaming passion that the bartender had made earlier, and it didn't have the flames on it as decoration. However, this blood-red liquid gave off a demonic and restrained feeling. Yang subconsciously took the glass, and the little beggar's voice sounded in his ears. The real flaming bar should be ignited from the heart, and not on the surface, because it burns your emotions and not your vision. This is the real flaming passion. Yang brought the glass closer to his eyes, and his nose twitched. He was surprised to smell a faint fishy smell. It was the smell of tomato juice mixed with lemon juice and alcohol. The little beggar didn't tell him that the flaming passion he made had another name, Bloody Mary. Yang's eyes began to burn, and he brought the glass to his mouth and took a sip. The customers and bartenders all looked at his face, waiting for him to make a judgment. After all, the final standard to judge a cocktail was the taste, and not the technique. No matter how dazzling the technique was, if the drink tasted bad, it would be meaningless. Yang's expression froze the moment the drink entered his mouth, and he stood there in a daze. His restrained aura disappeared completely, and a blush instantly spread across his face. Suddenly, without any warning, his eyes shone brightly, as if two clusters of flames were burning in them, and he said, "Good, what a great flaming bar. It should be ignited from the heart." Boss Zhao asked nervously, "Yang, how does it taste?" Yang looked at him, and his expression revealed unconcealable excitement, and said, "This is the most unique cocktail I've ever had, and it's also the cocktail that gave me the strongest shock, because it really made me feel the taste of the flaming bar burning in my heart. Only when I really drink it can I feel how different it is. If I had to give it an evaluation, then I think there are two words that are the most suitable." At this point, he paused for a moment, and his gaze swept across the many customers around him, before using a firm and powerful voice to say, "Unparalleled." As he spoke, Elder Yang drained the cup of wine in one gulp, as if he was afraid that someone else would steal his cup of wine. Immediately, a blazing feeling of anger surged up within him, and the raging flames within his chest burned even brighter, making it seem as if all the pores on his body had opened up. After drinking this cup of wine, he actually felt as if his life had been wasted, and the little beggar's evaluation of raging flames burning emotion as trash, now he felt that it was so fitting. That's right, he had actually been drinking trash for his entire life. No one would doubt Yang's judgment. Not only was he one of the oldest customers in Lifire City, he was also one of the few people with the highest status in Lifire City. Boss Zhao was dumbfounded, and the bartenders were already speechless. The customers were in an uproar, and all sorts of discussions spread throughout the open-air venue. Someone suddenly said, "Where's the little beggar?" Yang immediately came back to his senses, and when he looked again, the little beggar who was behind the bar counter was already gone. He quickly turned around and grabbed Boss Zhao. "Where is he?" I don't know." Just now, everyone's gaze was on Yang, who was tasting the wine. The little beggar was thin and small, and really didn't attract much attention. In just a short while, he actually disappeared. Yang couldn't be bothered to talk to Boss Zhao, and with a flash, he was already at the entrance of the bar, disappearing like a red cloud. The little beggar passed the wine to Yang, and left after leaving that sentence. He strolled on the street, and although he didn't walk very fast, his heart was filled with disappointment. Not so long ago, he was still the god of wine, but now, he had fallen to such a state. With a long sigh, the little beggar shook his head helplessly. The expression in his eyes didn't seem like that of an 11 or 12-year-old child, and in fact, it was exactly like that. His original name was Li Thing, and he didn't belong to this world. In his original world, he was only 32 years old, but he was the world's #1 god of wine. He created countless legends in the world of bartending and wine tasting. The original highest honor in the world of wine tasting was a 5-star gold medal, but for him alone, there was an additional 6-star Emperor Diamond medal, because his achievements were incomparable. In his previous life, Li Thing had never left wine in the short 32 years of his life, and he was even more obsessed with wine. When he was invited to appreciate the 1,000-year-old wine that had just been unearthed in his country, he finally couldn't resist the impulse in his heart, and drank a mouthful of the amber-colored wine that had already turned into a paste, and then fell into a deep sleep. Li Thing didn't regret it at all. If he had to do it all over again, he would still make the same choice. Even now, his mind was still echoing with the moving taste of that paste. At that time, before he fell asleep, his last thought was that even if he died, it would be worth it. However, he didn't die. Even he himself didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. When he woke up, he discovered that he was no longer the generation's god of wine, Li Thing, but a little beggar who begged for a living. His name had also become Ji-dong, and his mind was still filled with the pitifully innocent memories of Ji-dong. What made him most helpless was that even his entire world had changed. It had been a month since he came to this world called the Five Elements continent. Due to Ji-dong's original memories, language wasn't a barrier, but a dignified god of wine like him had to work hard for the sake of survival. This was unimaginable in his previous life. Li Thing had never been a person who blamed others and the heavens. After 3 days, he gradually accepted his new identity. He even wanted to thank the heavens for giving him a chance to live again. At the very least, they didn't deprive him of his memories and his obsession with fine wine. Since he had come to this new world, he was no longer the old Li Thing. Therefore, he decided to use the little beggar's original name, Ji-dong. Ji-dong's memories were so simple that it made people's hair stand on end. There were no memories of his life before the age of 5. After the age of 5, he begged for a living on the street. Other than a red string hanging around his neck, on which was a white jade tablet with the 2 words Ji-dong carved on it that seemed to be worth a bit of money, the only thing he owned was this robe that had countless patches. In the end, he didn't sell this jade tablet because in the memories of this body's original owner, this jade tablet seemed to be very precious to him. However, he needed to survive and eat. As the dignified god of wine, he naturally couldn't beg for a living. Very soon, he found the most famous flaming bar in Flaming City. In this month, other than gradually understanding this world, Ji-dong spent every day observing the surroundings of the flaming bar. His understanding of this world was still very limited. He only knew that this was a country at the southern end of the Five Elements continent, and their totem was fire. Fortunately for Ji-dong, the people here also liked to drink. In the following period of time, he relied on the cold and hard steamed buns and dried meat that the original owner of this body had left under a bridge to sustain his new life. Every day, he would carefully observe the flaming bar. Of course, Ji-dong's observation wasn't as simple as it seemed. He was also smelling and listening. The first thing he wanted to observe was the difference between the wines of this world and his previous world, as well as the taste and characteristics of these wines. That's right, as a little beggar, he naturally couldn't taste them. However, after transmigrating to this world, Ji-dong had retained one of his abilities, and that was his sixth sense, which was far more sensitive than a normal person's. The reason why the International Wine Tasters Association had awarded him the unprecedented 6-starred Emperor Diamond Medal was because of his invention of the Six Senses wine tasting method. In Ji-dong's theory, wine tasting didn't just rely on taste. Smell, sight, hearing, touch, and other senses could also be used to taste wine. In reality, in his previous world, the only person who could do this was himself. Chapter 3. Outside the fiery passion bar, with Ji-dong's status as a beggar, it was naturally impossible for him to have a taste. Thus, he could only watch, smell, and listen. Relying on his acute sense of smell, hearing, and eyesight, as well as his experience as the god of wine, he smelled the aroma of the bartenders as they mixed their drink. He carefully observed the expressions of the drinkers, the changes in their bodies, and the comments they made. After a whole month, Ji-dong had grasped the taste of the majority of the alcohol here, and compared it with the alcohol of his original world. If anyone knew that he could judge a drink like this, and even mix it successfully, their jaws would probably drop to the ground. Moreover, the cocktail recipe was extremely rigorous. After coming to a new world, he could adjust the proportion of ingredients based on his own observation. Ji-dong was definitely worthy of the title of the god of wine. As for Yang, he was also the main target of Ji-dong's observation. If he wanted to solve the problem of food and clothing, he naturally had to have a way, and with his pride and self-esteem as the god of wine, he would never allow himself to be an ordinary bartender. Therefore, Ji-dong chose Yang. Yang would go to the flaming bar every day to burn his emotions. With Ji-dong's eyesight, He could naturally see that this old customer not only had a wealth of wine-tasting experience and dedication to good wine, but also had an extraordinary status. His appearance today was not a coincidence, but had been carefully planned. Whether it was the route to sneak into the open-air bar or the time to make a sound, it was all carefully thought out by Ji-dong. Even his immediate departure after mixing the drinks was part of the plan. This was the strategy of loosening the reins only to grasp better. The reason why Ji-dong sighed earlier was not only because of his current depravity, but also because of this body. In his previous life, he was tall and handsome, but in this life, not only was he very skinny because of his age, this body was too weak. The 3 suns illuminating the moon mixing technique just now was done after careful consideration by Ji-dong in order to match this body. For him in his previous life, this was a very simple technique, but today this body almost failed. The 3 suns were made, but the moon was not, so it could only be considered a success. Of course, outsiders would not be able to tell. Moreover, because of the concentration and the physical exertion during the bartending process, he felt extremely weak now. He couldn't even walk steadily. An excellent bartender must have an excellent body. Otherwise, no matter how good his skills were, he wouldn't be able to perform well. Ji-dong was now faced with this helpless embarrassment. "Little brother, wait a minute." Ji-dong only saw a blur in front of him. A red shadow flashed, and Yang was already in front of him. So fast. Is this the speed that a human can achieve? Ji-dong looked at Yang and couldn't help but be shocked. He was sure that Yang's speed just now was definitely faster than the 100-meter sprint champion in his previous world. One should know that his hearing was very good. When Yang shouted, he was at least tens of meters away, and in the next moment, he was in front of him. This was really incomprehensible to him. However, from the change in Yang's way of addressing him, Ji-dong knew that he had achieved his goal. Looking at the skinny Ji-dong in front of him, whose face was covered by dirt and was obviously malnourished, Yang still couldn't believe that the glass of wine from before was actually made by him. However, the truth was right in front of him, and he had no choice but to believe it. "Little brother, why are you in such a hurry to leave?" Ji-dong glanced at him and said, "I've finished mixing the wine. Why aren't you leaving?" Yang exclaimed, "The flaming bar-burning passion you just made is the most unique cocktail I've had in all these years. However, I'm very curious. Since you have this skill, why do you still?" Of course, Ji-dong understood the meaning behind his words. The pride that came from his bones made him subconsciously puff out his chest and say, "Wine is an art. Using money to measure it is a stain to it. Even though I no longer have a family, even though I've fallen to become a beggar, not just anyone can drink the wine I mix. I helped you today because I saw that you were also a wine lover, and I don't want you to continue being intoxicated by that trash." Although these words came from the mouth of a child who was only 11 or 12 years old, Yang didn't doubt it at all because of the flaming bar-burning passion. Rubbing his hands together, the expression in Yang's eyes changed, as if he had decided on something. He said, "Little brother, I won't beat around the bush with you. I hope to drink the wine you mix every day. I don't know if I have such an honor." "You? On what basis?" Ji-dong raised his chin and looked up at Yang, but there wasn't the slightest bit of fear in his eyes. Yang looked him in the eye and said, "On the basis that my only hobbies in life are wine and this." As he spoke, his eyes suddenly lit up, and an indescribable pressure was suddenly released from his body. Ji-dong felt a tightness in his chest, and instinctively took a few steps back. A glaring red light suddenly exploded with Yang's body as the center. Under his control, the red light only rose up within a 1-meter radius around his body, but within a 3-meter radius, the air actually rippled and distorted due to the red light. A huge fiery red phantom appeared behind Yang. It seemed to be a giant red bird, and its fiery red wings were spread out, as if it was flying. The red light around Yang's body was also enveloped in a layer of gold, making him look like a god who had descended from heaven. The invisible majesty was the source of the pressure. Then, just above his head, the red light gathered, and a crown-like object appeared. The crown was dazzling white, and the moment it appeared, it immediately became the center of Yang and his aura. Even the giant fiery bird phantom behind him couldn't compare to it. The white crown looked exceptionally dazzling. Below it was a circle about 5 centimeters wide, and above it were 9 triangular protrusions, each of which had a perfectly round ruby-like ball at the top. On the front of the lower circle, there were a total of 3 complete red 5-pointed stars, and 1.5 5-pointed star, shining with the same brilliance as the red balls on the 9 tips of the crown. The most eye-catching thing was the flame pattern imprinted on the tip of the crown. The flame seemed to be alive, fluctuating on the tip of the crown. Because this strange crown was formed in a circle, Ji Dong couldn't see clearly whether there was a flame imprint on each of the protrusions, but he could clearly feel that this crown-like object contained extremely terrifying energy. Ji Dong was stunned. Is this magic? Along with the changes on Yang's body, the temperature of the surrounding air was rising sharply, and the rolling heat waves made the scene in front of Ji Dong blurry. Yang was very satisfied with Ji Dong's surprised expression. He smiled slightly and said, "How is it? Now, am I qualified to taste the wine you mixed?" "Don't worry, I'm not threatening you. I just want to tell you that I have the ability to change your life. My name is Yang Bingtian, the Dean of Fire City's Central Fire Academy, and I'm a Fire Element Level 7 Great Grandmaster." As he spoke, he raised his right hand, and the white crown on his head slowly floated out and fell on top of his palm, but it did not fall into place. Instead, it slowly rotated on his palm. Only then did Ji Dong see clearly. On the 9 triangular tips of the crown, the front 5 were branded with a flame pattern, while the back 4 were not. Could these 5 flame patterns be the 5 crowns he was talking about? Ji Dong pointed to the crown in Yang's hand and said with some sluggishness, "Can you tell me first, what is this thing? Also, what do you mean by the 5 crowns Sun Crown, Fire Element Level 7 Great Grandmaster? Why don't I understand?" This time, it was Yang Bingtian's turn to be surprised. He stared at Ji Dong with wide eyes, as if looking at a monster, and said, You don't even know the Demon Master in Yang Crown? So hot, so hot." Ji Dong only felt that the scenery in front of him was getting more and more blurred. The feeling of his head being heavy made his body sway slightly, but he still shook his head and murmured, "I don't know." Yang Bingtian's eyes showed a trace of understanding and said, "No wonder you don't know. Begging for a living every day, you may not have come into contact with this level. Hey, what's wrong with you, little brother?" Ji Dong's body didn't allow him to persevere any longer. He hadn't had a good meal for the past month, and his body was already weak to begin with. The concentration he had when he was mixing the wine had almost exhausted all of his energy. Now that he was being roasted by the scorching heat in front of him, his vision darkened and he collapsed. The last thing he felt was that his body seemed to have been caught by someone and didn't smash into the hard ground. When Yang Bingtian caught Ji Dong's body, the vision on his body had already disappeared. Feeling the weak blood vessels in Ji Dong's body, he sighed softly and said, "This child seems to be a pitiful person. I just don't know how he can make such a strange cocktail at such a young age. Is he a descendant of a noble family? Let's take him back first." Immediately, he picked up Ji Dong's body and moved his feet slightly. In a few blinks of an eye, they had disappeared at the end of the street. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, Ji Dong gradually regained consciousness. The rich fragrance stimulated his acute sense of smell along with his breath. "This is the smell of chicken soup?" Slowly opening his eyes, the feeling of weakness did not completely disappear because of sleep. When he looked carefully, Ji Dong found himself lying in an unfamiliar place. The windows were clean and the table was clean. The room was not very big, about 20 square meters or so. It was not luxurious and only had simple decorations. What attracted Ji Dong's attention the most was the mural on the ceiling. It was a vivid and lifelike fire phoenix. Its entire body was fiery red, and its wings were flapping as if it was going to break through the sky. The edge of the fiery red pattern was golden, and it was somewhat similar to the red light that Yang Bingtian released before he fainted. At this time, Ji Dong also came to his senses. So the light that appeared behind Yang Bingtian was a fire phoenix. "You're awake." Yang Bingtian's gentle voice sounded. Ji Dong supported his body and sat up. He saw Yang Bingtian sitting on the other side of the table beside the bed. On the table was a clay pot, a plate of meat with soy sauce, and 2 steamed buns. Ji Dong lowered his head and looked at himself. He did not know when, but the dirt on his body had been washed away, and he had even changed into a clean set of clothes. The refreshing feeling that he had not felt for a long time made him feel refreshed. Looking at the food on the table, Ji Dong said, "Are these for me?" Yang Bingtian smiled and nodded. "Eat something first. Your body is very weak." Ji Dong did not stand on ceremony. He picked up the empty bowl on the table and opened the clay pot. He did not need to look to know that it was a pot of chicken soup. His nose had already told him the answer. What surprised Yang Bingtian was that although Ji Dong was obviously very hungry, he was not in a hurry when eating. He tore the steamed bun bit by bit and sent it into his mouth. He only ate half of it before stopping. He also only ate 3 or 4 thin slices of meat with soy sauce, but he drank 2 bowls of chicken soup. Although he did not maintain the elegance of a noble when eating, his natural movements gave people a very harmonious feeling. "Why don't you eat more?" Yang Bingtian asked. Ji Dong shook his head. "I haven't eaten a proper meal in a long time. There is too little oil in my stomach. Eating too much is not good for my body." After listening to Ji Dong, Yang Bingtian could not help but be surprised. This child's mentality was very mature. "Are you willing to tell me about yourself?" Ji Dong looked at Yang Bingtian. After 2 bowls of hot chicken soup entered his stomach, the warm feeling dispelled some of his weakness. He seemed to have some strength in his body. He said, "There is nothing to say. I come from a family that loves wine. After my family broke up, I wandered here. You want to know why I know how to mix wine? It's very simple. It's passed down in my family." Before yesterday's operation, Ji Dong had already thought of an excuse. The more he said, the easier it would be for him to expose himself. The less he said, the better. He never thought that his excuse would not make Yang Bingtian suspicious. But so what if he was suspicious? His goal wasn't to hide his identity. As expected, after hearing Ji Dong's words, Yang Bingtian frowned slightly. He carefully looked at Ji Dong for a long time, but he could not see anything from the calm and excited expression on his face. "It seems that you are a child with a hard life." Ji Dong put his hands on the table and said in a low voice, "I don't need pity. You brought me back because you want me to mix wine for you." Yang Bingtian looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. He said, "Then are you willing?" Ji Dong said, "First tell me, what was the change in your body yesterday? Also, what is that Devil Master Yin Yang crown?" Chapter 4. Hearing Ji Dong's question, Yang Bingtian couldn't help but say, "It seems that your family is really addicted to wine and doesn't care about the outside world. In our 5 elements continent, there is a special profession, which is also the most important profession on the continent. No matter which side you are in, the military or the government, you are judged by this profession. This profession is called Yin and Yang magician." "Yin and Yang magician? So you are a Yin and Yang magician?" Ji Dong asked doubtfully. The curiosity in his heart was completely ignited. Yang Bingtian nodded and said, "Yes, I am Yin and Yang magician of the 3rd fire element. The level and strength of a Yin and Yang magician determines a person's future. Not to mention military officers, even civil officers are required to at least reach the level of condensing a Yin and Yang crown. Otherwise, they will not be put in an important position. It is the same in the 5 great empires on the continent. Now you understand why I was surprised that you didn't know about the profession yin and yang magician. Ji Dong asked a little eagerly. Then what is the specific ability of this yin and yang magician? Yang Bingtian said, the abilities of a yin and yang magician are too broad. The first is their fighting ability. A scholar yin and yang magician, who can condense a yin and yang crown, has the ability to defeat at least 10 adult soldiers. And the most powerful yin and yang magician is a heaven-defying existence. They have the ability to easily destroy a city. The ranks and theories of yin and yang magician are too broad, and it can't be finished in a short time. As long as you are willing to stay, someone will naturally teach you in the future. Do you still remember that I told you that I am the Dean of the Fire Academy? The Fire Academy is a school that specializes in cultivating yin and yang magicians of the fire element. You are close to wine, and the breath that you exude proves that your nature is of the fire element. No matter what your aptitude is, I can let you stay in the academy to study. If you mix wine for me, even if you are a working student of the academy, all the expenses such as food and accommodation will be covered by the academy. What do you think? Hearing Yang Bingtian's words, Ji Dong's eyes revealed a bit of thinking. Yang Bingtian smiled faintly and said confidently, our Fire Academy is one of the best junior yin and yang magician schools in the Southern Fire Empire. The length of the school is 6 years, and only 60 students under 10 years old are enrolled each year. Judging from your age, you should be in the same range. Every year, there are over 1,000 students applying for the school. The entrance examination is extremely strict, and only the most talented students will be accepted by us. The graduation rate is as high as 30%, which ranks in the top 10 junior yin and yang magician schools in the whole continent. Why are you so proud of the graduation rate? May I ask, what's the standard for your graduation? Ji Dong asked doubtfully. Yang Bingtian patted his forehead and said helplessly, I forgot that you don't know much about the yin and yang magician profession. The graduation standard for a junior yin and yang magician is whether or not you can condense a yin and yang crown during the course of study. If you can reach the 10th rank and successfully condense a yin and yang crown, then you can be a real yin and yang magician. It will be much easier for you to pursue any profession in the future. Even if you don't work, the empire will still provide you with a certain amount of living expenses. As for the graduation rate you mentioned, if a junior yin and yang magician school could graduate 10%, they would be laughing up their sleeves. Ji Dong nodded and said, in other words, if I can become a yin and yang magician with a yin and yang crown after 6 years of study, then I won't have to worry about my future. This is indeed a very good arrangement. Yang Bingtian's eyes flashed with a hint of pride. Of course. You don't know how many people are dying to enter our Fire Academy. So, you agree? Ji Dong stood up and said, thank you for your hospitality. Then he walked towards the door. Yang Bingtian was stunned at first, but he immediately reacted and said, wait a minute, what do you mean? Ji Dong stopped and said without turning his head, the graduation rate is only 30%. I've been bartending for you for 6 years in exchange for such a small chance. If I don't want to worry about food, why don't I work in a bar? Yang Bingtian frowned and said, then what do you want? Money? Ji Dong suddenly turned around and said, I've said it before, don't use money to measure my wine. I can agree to your arrangement. I'm indeed interested in becoming a yin and yang magician, but I have a few conditions. Yang Bingtian also stood up and slowly walked in front of Ji Dong. He looked down at him and said, little friend, it's been many years since someone spoke to me in such a tone. His voice was very calm, but his eyes were filled with anger. Yang Bingtian not only had a high status in Fire City, but also in the entire Southern Fire Empire. Being contradicted by a beggar he picked up, he couldn't accept it. He seemed to be asking, what qualifications do you have to discuss conditions with me? Ji Dong raised his head and looked straight into Yang Bingtian's eyes that were filled with pressure. He said, "You want to say, what qualifications do I have to discuss conditions with you? Don't worry, I won't take advantage of you. What I can get from you is more than double. Simply put, the flaming bar passion I made today is still trash." Yang Bingtian was stunned for a moment and said, "That glass of wine is also trash?" A trace of sadness flashed in Ji Dong's eyes. He said, "My body is weak, and the restriction of my age makes it impossible for me to achieve a higher level of bartending skills. In my heart, there are a total of 1,964 basic cocktails and 3,162 special cocktails. If I have enough time and ingredients, this number will only continue to increase. The reason why I'm discussing conditions with you is that within 6 years, I won't let you drink another cocktail. The quality of each cocktail will only be better than the one you made today. If I can't do it, you can kick me out at any time. Now, do I have the qualifications?" When he said the last sentence, his voice was filled with pride and even a little choked up. The glorious god of wine in his previous life had never been doubted to his face. Even though Ji Dong had tried his best to accept his new identity, the pride in his bones still made him unwilling to bow down to anyone. Even if he knew that the person in front of him could change the fate of his new identity, it was still the same. Just like when he was still a beggar, he had never begged even once. He only relied on the dry rations that his body had accumulated to barely survive. Yang Bingtian was truly shocked. This child in front of him was too arrogant, but if what he said was true, then he definitely had the right to be arrogant. He suddenly thought of someone and asked, "What's your relationship with the president of the Bartenders Guild, Sir Du Sikong, the god of wine?" "God of wine?" The corner of Ji Dong's mouth twitched slightly, but he quickly calmed down and said, "I have nothing to do with him. Didn't you say that the yin and yang magician is the noblest profession in this world? Then why do you call a bartender, sir?" Yang Bingtian had already calmed down by now. He smiled and said, "That's because Sir Du Sikong himself is a 6 crowns yang crown water celestial sage, a famous yin and yang magician of the Northern Water Empire. He's even stronger than me. Moreover, there's a dividing line between 5 crowns and 6 crowns, so I naturally have to call him sir. Tell me your conditions." Ji Dong did his best to cast aside his memories of his past life. He secretly said to himself, "You're Ji Dong now, no longer the god of wine Li Thing. Since you've come to this world, you have to live according to the ways of this world and return to the peak." After strengthening his belief, the light in Ji Dong's eyes became clearer. He said, "I have a total of 3 conditions. First, I need a specialized bartending room. You have to buy all the alcohol you can find in the market. This way, I can guarantee that I can make cocktails of the highest quality. Without my permission, you can't bring anyone other than you to the bartending room. I'll often make cocktails there, and no one can disturb me. If I'm missing any alcohol, you'll be responsible for all the expenses." Yang Bingtian laughed and said, "That's what I should do. I promise you." Ji Dong said calmly, "Second condition, I'll only make 1 glass of alcohol for you every day. Aside from the bartending, you'll be responsible for all my other expenses." Yang Bingtian was stunned. He asked with some embarrassment, "Why only 1 glass?" Ji Dong glanced at him and said, "Don't you know that you can't have too much of a delicacy? A glass of alcohol is enough to make you savor it for a day. If I can't do that, what use do you have for me?" Yang Bingtian seemed to be infected by Ji Dong's strong confidence. He said, "All right, I believe you. I'll also agree to this condition. However, your expenses can't exceed 20 gold coins a month. My salary is also limited." Ji Dong nodded and said, "Third condition, according to what you said, I'll be entering the Fire Academy to study. So, I want you to do your best to help me complete my studies, condense the yin-yang crown you spoke of, and successfully graduate. If I find that I can't condense the yin-yang crown within these 6 years, I'll leave at any time. Yang Bingtian looked at Ji Dong with some surprise. Kid, are you really only 11 or 12 years old? You're so meticulous, almost catching up to this old man. I can help you in your training, but aside from condensing the yin-yang crown, I won't teach you any magic technique. I want to make this clear in advance. Magic techniques? What's that? Ji Dong asked suspiciously. Yang Bingtian said, before condensing the yin-yang crown, you won't have any magic techniques. Only with the yin-yang crown will you have the possibility to practice magic technique. To put it bluntly, magic techniques are techniques that use the yin and yang magic within your body. Normally, a yin and yang magician will find a master to learn magic techniques after condensing the yin-yang crown, or spend a lot of money to buy magic technique books to learn. However, the most suitable magic techniques are the most useful. Moreover, money can't buy a powerful magic technique. Of course, you can also create your own magic technique. If you succeed, it will undoubtedly be the most suitable for you, but you need to go through a lot of practice. Ji Dong said, so you're saying that you don't want to take me as your disciple? Yang Bingtian's eyes showed a trace of pride similar to Ji Dong's. He said, that's a different matter. The wine you make is really good, but if you want to become my disciple, you have to show enough talent. The yin and yang magician is very strict in accepting disciples. Until now, I only have one disciple. Ji Dong raised his right hand and stretched it in front of Yang Bingtian. What are you doing? Yang Bingtian looked at his hand. Ji Dong said, deal. Yang Bingtian smiled and shook his head helplessly. With his status as a 5-crown C Fire Grand Master, he actually suffered a loss after negotiating with a child. It was really hard for him to believe. But when he thought of the thousands of cocktail recipes that Ji Dong had mentioned, he could only keep his displeasure to himself. He patted Ji Dong's thin hand and said, then let's have a deal. Ji Dong said, as a wine lover, this is probably the wisest decision you've made in your life. Yang Bingtian smiled. I hope so too. Let's wait and see. You're definitely the youngest to talk terms with me. Ji Dong said, when can I enter the Fire Academy? Yang Bingtian said, you're already in the Fire Academy. As the dean, of course I have to live in the academy. This is my lounge. But from now on, this place will belong to you. I'll order people to make wine cabinets and send them to you. I'll get everything you need as soon as possible. School starts in 2 days. You should take care of your body during this time. The area of the distant Fire Academy was not very large. After staying here for 2 days, Ji Dong had basically figured out the situation of the distant Fire Academy. The entire academy was composed of 2 teaching buildings, 2 dormitory buildings, 2 sports fields with a diameter of 150 meters, and 10 testing fields. Ji Dong was not clear about what those testing fields were for. They looked like large warehouse houses, and the whole was circular. After eating well for 2 days, Ji Dong's spirit was much better than before he was brought back by Yang Bingtian. 2 days ago, when he looked at himself with a smooth metal mirror for the first time, he saw his new appearance clearly. Compared with his previous life, it could only be described as the difference between heaven and earth. It couldn't be any more ordinary. The only thing that Ji Dong could console himself with was that at least there was no shortage of parts, everything was complete. Yang Bingtian was indeed the dean. He was very efficient. It only took him 1 day to get all the wine cabinet. Yang Bingtian lived on the top floor of one of the 2 academic buildings. He was the only one living here, so there were plenty of rooms. Ji Dong didn't need to live in the dormitory, so he stayed in the simple lounge. Of course, the lounge now had a complete bar counter with all kinds of wine and bartending tools. Many of them were Yang Bingtian's collection. Chapter 5. The distant Fire Academy had a holiday every year, which was during the summer. Because the summer of the Southern Fire Empire was too hot, the school would only start in early autumn, during which there would be a 3-month holiday. It was currently the holiday period, so the academy was very deserted, with very few people to be seen. Originally, Ji Dong had thought that the entrance exam that Yang Bingtian had mentioned should also start since the school was about to start. He wanted to broaden his horizons, but Yang Bingtian told him that the entrance exam was held at the end of each school year, and those who passed the exam would directly enter the next school year. Ji Dong's clothes were soaked with sweat after he slowly ran 2 laps around the sports field. His body was too weak. Even if he had good food to supplement his body, it wouldn't recover in a day or two. Whether it was for making drinks or for the yin and yang magician that Ji Dong was very curious about, he had to exercise so that his body could recover to the level of a normal person as soon as possible. The school will start tomorrow. I haven't looked forward to something like this for a long time. Yin and yang magician, what kind of profession is it? While thinking, Ji Dong walked back to the teaching building and went to his room. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Yang Bingtian sitting there waiting for him with an eager expression. Yesterday, after everything was ready, he made a glass of wine for Yang Bingtian. After drinking that glass of wine, Yang Bingtian's attitude towards him became gentler. Just like a great man in Ji Dong's previous life once said, practice is the only standard to test the truth. After drinking the wine that he made, Yang Bingtian began to feel that it was extremely wise for him to agree to Ji Dong's conditions. Ji Dong, what are you going to make today? Seeing Ji Dong was back, Yang Bingtian immediately stood up and walked towards him. Ji Dong said, I'm going to take a shower first, and then I'll make a drink for you. Ji Dong would never discount what he had promised. This was Ji Dong's principle. Yang Bingtian said, then hurry up. The school will start tomorrow, and I'll test your yin and yang property to see which series you are more suitable for. Yin and yang property? What do you mean? Ji Dong asked in confusion. Yang Bingtian said, from your breath, I can see that your nature is fire, but fire is also divided into yin and yang. One is yang fire, and the other is yin fire. Each has its own characteristic. For example, I practice yang fire, which means I'm a third fire magician. If I practice yin fire, then I'm a third fire magician of the Fuhua series. Ji Dong said, okay, then I'll go take a shower first. The more he listened to Yang Bingtian's introduction, the more curious Ji Dong was about yin and yang magician. He gradually understood that the classification of yin and yang magician seemed to be related to his previous life's yin and yang, 5 elements, and heavenly stems. Among the 10 heavenly stems, Bing and Ding were fire, but he didn't do any research in this area. He only knew that the South said Bing and Ding fire, but he didn't know that Bing fire could also be called yang fire, and Ding fire was yin fire. There was a washroom outside Ji Dong's room. After a quick shower, he changed into a clean set of clothes. As soon as he walked out, he saw Yang Bingtian pacing restlessly in the room. He had seen this kind of situation many times in his previous life, so he naturally understood Yang Bingtian's eagerness. He didn't say anything and went behind the bar. The moment Ji Dong held the shaker in his hand, he seemed to have changed into a different person. What Yang Bingtian admired the most was Ji Dong's extreme concentration when he was mixing drink. Although Ji Dong's body wasn't as strong as it used to be, his level of mixing drinks was the same as it was in his previous life. He had truly reached the realm of nothing but wine. Simply put, the same ingredients were mixed by different people, and the taste was completely different, even if the ratio of seasoning was the same. Yang Bingtian held his breath and focused on Ji Dong's movements, afraid that he would disturb Ji Dong. Ji Dong's movements were very fast. He didn't even need to look with his eyes. He just needed to backhand to grab the wine cabinet behind him, and he could easily get the wine he needed. As the god of wine, he would never forget the placement of any wine on the cabinet after seeing it once. 2/10 of green anise wine, 2/10 of Bacardi rum, 3/10 of yellow gold wine, and a red vermouth that Ji Dong had specially asked Yang Bingtian to buy to fill up the last 3/10. When all the bottles returned to their original positions, the shaker had already been tossed into the air. Even Yang Bingtian didn't notice when he closed the lid. Ji Dong used an ordinary crystal shaker, which was also Ji Dong's favorite in his previous life. Although the crystal shaker was easily damaged, it was the least likely to affect the taste of the wine. It was much better than a metal shaker. It's a pity that there's no ice, Ji Dong muttered to himself. At the same time, he raised his hands. The crystal shaker rolled back and forth on his palms. His hands were like magnets that kept sucking the shaker. As the shaker rolled, Yang Bingtian could clearly see the color of the wine inside the crystal shaker changing. The entire mixing process was very short. When the shaker finally fell from the air, it actually spun on the table like a top. Although the wine inside was full, it still appeared to be in a spiral shape. Although this method is simple, it can remove the foam from the wine. Thus, it doesn't need to be filtered. Ji Dong's fingers moved slightly and the shaker stopped. He opened the lid and poured the wine into a thick high-wave glass. When the last drop of wine was poured into the glass, the entire glass showed an extremely strange color. The top was pink and it gradually spread downward. It gradually became lighter until it became a light blue, then a sky blue, and continued to the bottom of the glass. This glass of wine seemed to be composed of 2 colors. Mixing wine is an art. When mixing wine, the bartender will infuse their own feelings into the glass of wine. Therefore, when the bartender's mood is different, the same wine will taste different. Please have a taste. This glass of wine is called charm. It is suitable to be sipped. Charm? What a good charm! Yang Bingtian praised sincerely. When he took the first sip, he was completely conquered by the charm of this glass of wine. At first, it was slightly sour and sweet, but with each sip, the taste changed continuously just like its color. When the last blue wine completely changed the taste into a complex and charming one, the texture was unusual. The heavy and stimulating anise oil and the mellow and gentle juniper flavor perfectly blended. Yang Bingtian felt as if he was floating in the air. Ji Dong didn't ask Yang Bingtian how he felt after tasting the wine. He just sat quietly and waited. This was the confidence of the god of wine. Yang Bingtian put down the high-wave glass with great reluctance. If it wasn't for Ji Dong beside him, he would have had the urge to lick the glass with his tongue. It's perfect. You're right. Delicacies can't be used too much. Being able to enjoy it once a day is already my greatest satisfaction. Yang Bingtian forced himself to wake up from the intoxicated feeling. When he looked at Ji Dong again, the wrinkles on his face were already piled up by the smile on his face. Didn't you say you were going to test my yin and yang attributes? Ji Dong reminded him. Oh, I was too immersed, I forgot. Yang Bingtian chuckled a little embarrassedly. With a shake of his wrist, a red gemstone bracelet on his wrist flashed, and a thin, transparent stick appeared in his hand. The stick was a foot long and looked like it was made of crystal. There were markings on it and there were red and blue balls on each end. Come, hold the blue one with your left hand and the red one with your right. Relax your entire body. Yang Bingtian pinched the center of the crystal stick and handed it to Ji Dong. Ji Dong did as he was told. Yang Bingtian raised his hand and pressed it on Ji Dong's forehead. A boiling hot current immediately flowed from Yang Bingtian's hand into Ji Dong's body. The boiling hot current instantly flowed into every corner of Ji Dong's body. The feeling of heat made him feel indescribably comfortable, and the crystal stick in his hands began to change. The blue color spread from the bead in his left hand, while the red color spread from his right hand and gathered in the center of the crystal stick. When Yang Bingtian saw that the 2 colors were spreading at almost the same speed, he couldn't help but frown. Soon, the 2 colors gradually gathered in the center, and coincidentally met at the center of the scale. It can't be. Withdrawing his hand from Ji Dong's forehead, Yang Bingtian bent down and moved his eyes to the center of the crystal stick. He stared at the place where the two colors converged, and his eyes were completely dull. Ji Dong handed the crystal stick back to him and said, "If you want to praise me as a genius, I don't mind." It was rare to see Yang Bingtian so shocked, so Ji Dong couldn't help but tease him. "Genius? You really are a genius. You're just a natural trash. I've taught for so many years, but I've never seen such a complete trash like you." "What did you say?" Ji Dong was shocked. Although this body was a little weak, he didn't believe that he was a trash. Yang Bingtian pointed at the crystal stick and said, "Look, your body is of the fire attribute, and this is a test stick for the fire attribute. The blue color represents Yin fire, and the red color represents Yang fire. If you insist on saying that you are a genius, then there's nothing wrong with it. The balance of Yin and Yang, it's actually the balance of Yin and Yang. I've lived for more than 60 years, and this is the first time I've seen someone with the complete balance of Yin and Yang." "What's wrong with the balance of Yin and Yang? Isn't the balance of Yin and Yang in the human body good for the body?" Ji Dong was confused. Yang Bingtian smiled bitterly and said, "That's right. For ordinary people, a body with a balance of Yin and Yang is a symbol of longevity. However, for us, Yin and Yang magician, a balance of Yin and Yang is even rarer than pure Yin and pure Yang. Do you remember what I told you before? You have to choose the direction of your cultivation based on the Yin and Yang attributes. Generally speaking, ordinary people's Yin and Yang attributes are around 6 or 4, which is more inclined towards Yang or Yin. We will not accept students with 6 or 4, because the difference between the Yin and Yang attributes is too small, and it is very difficult to cultivate a Yin corona or Yang corona. Even if they manage to cultivate it, it will be very difficult for them to continue to improve in the future. At the very least, they need to have a Yin and Yang attribute of at least 3 or 7 to have a 30% chance of cultivating a Yin-Yang corona. For example, my own attribute is the rare 2 of 8 Yin and Yang attribute, takes up 80% of my attribute. Ji Dong said in a daze. So you're saying that a pure Yin or pure Yang body will have the best effect in cultivating the Yin and Yang magician? Yang Bingtian shook his head and said, "That's not true. Because a pure Yin or pure Yang body is too extreme, it will be very difficult for them to live past the age of 20. Therefore, they are not suitable for cultivation. Unless a man and a woman are pure Yin and pure Yang respectively, they will be able to harmonize their Yin and Yang before the age of 20. Only then will there be a possibility of cultivation. However, the two of them can never be separated, or else there is a possibility of sudden death at any time. Therefore, the best physique to cultivate the Yin and Yang magician should be 9-1, which is extremely inclined towards one side. This is what we, the Yin and Yang magician, refer to as a peerless genius." Ji Dong took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled and said, "Then can you tell me, if I want to cultivate the Yin and Yang magician, how should I choose?" The wrinkles on Yang Bingtian's face moved a little, and he said, "It's very difficult, because you are born with a balance of Yin and Yang, so you cannot break this balance. Therefore, if you want to cultivate the Yin and Yang magician, you must cultivate both the Yin and Ding fire elements at the same time, maintaining the balance of Yin and Yang. Although I really hope to be able to drink the wine you make, I can't lie to you. A person with 3 to 7 split Yin and Yang will have twice the speed of a person with 6 to 4 split Yin and Yang, and so on. A person with 9-1 split Yin and Yang will have 8 times the speed of a person with 6 to 4 split Yin and Yang. As for you with 5 to 5 split Yin and Yang, your cultivation speed is 1 to 16 times the speed of a person with 9-1 split Yin and Yang. If a Yin and Yang magician cannot cultivate the Yin and Yang crown before the age of 18, then they will never have the chance in their lifetime." "Thank you for telling me this." Ji Dong looked at Yang Bingtian with respect for the first time. Yang Bingtian was undoubtedly very dependent on the wine he made, but he did not lie to him. He was indeed a teacher. Yang Bingtian gently patted Ji Dong's shoulder and said, "Actually, being a bartender is also a very good profession. Even if you are not willing to mix wine for ordinary people, I can still introduce you to the Bartenders Guild. With your skills, you will definitely shine in the bartender world." Ji Dong shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, but I still want to give it a try." "You mean?" Yang Bingtian's eyes widened, but he saw the determination that was as hard as metal in his excited eyes. "I want to try to become a yin and yang magician. If my talent is not enough, then I will put in 32 times the effort." Since he came to such a magical world, why not change his way of living? Even if he did not succeed, what would he lose? Chapter 6. I'm 10 years and 9 months old this year. I still have more than 7 years. Even if I don't succeed in the end, it won't be too late for you to introduce me to the Bartenders Guild. By then, I should be able to make better wine. Ji Dong said resolutely. Age was the memory left behind by this body. Yang Bingtian said seriously, "Have you really decided?" Ji Dong said firmly, "How do you know if you won't succeed if you don't try?" He had never been a person who gave up easily. Yang Bingtian nodded and said, "All right, I'll try my best to help you. I won't drink your wine for nothing. If you can really practice 2 elements at the same time and form the yin-yang crown, no matter what your future achievements are, you'll be considered to be a pioneer in the world of yin and yang magician. You should rest first. I'll go back and think about this carefully." Walking out of Ji Dong's room and closing the door, Yang Bingtian said to himself, "What kind of family can raise such a child? Not only does he have skills that are not inferior to senior bartenders, but he also has such a firm and steady mind. Perhaps he can really turn waste into treasure?" In the morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone into the room through the window, Ji Dong got up. He always had the good habit of sleeping early and getting up early. Moreover, today was the first day of school. He would work 32 times harder from today onward. After waving his fist and washing up, Ji Dong immediately ran downstairs. He decided to jog a few laps to warm himself up. However, when he came downstairs, he realized that he might not be able to run today. Even though the sun had just risen, the empty academy yesterday had become unusually lively. Many children around his age or older than him had come to the academy accompanied by their parents. The dormitory building was even more lively. Not being able to run did not dispel Ji Dong's goal of training his body. He stretched his body on the spot. Being young also had its advantages. Although this body was weak, its flexibility was not bad. After moving for a while, his body slightly heated up, as if he had gained a little more strength. "Hey, are you also a new student this year?" A crisp voice sounded from behind Ji Dong. Ji Dong turned around and saw a youth about his age standing behind him, dressed in ordinary clothes. Although he was dressed in the same plain clothes as Ji Dong, his appearance was much more outstanding. His pink face seemed to be able to squeeze water out of it. His 2 big black eyes were extremely lively, and his neat short hair added a bit of vitality. "I'm a freshman in the Fuhua series. What about you?" The young man naturally walked to Ji Dong's side and put his arm around Ji Dong's shoulder, looking very affectionate. "You're from the Fuhua series? Are you a girl?" Ji Dong looked at him with some surprise. A 10-year-old child hadn't developed much, and the gender difference wasn't that obvious. T, I'm a real man. Do you want me to take off my pants for you to see? Who told you that the Fuhua series must be a girl? The young man said angrily. Ji Dong frowned. Just as he was about to say something, a loud voice came from not far away. "Wow, Bisso, you sissy is here. See if I don't beat you to death this time." An aggressive, muscular young man who was almost a head taller than Ji Dong and the young man next to him ran over. His red hair was very dazzling, and his shoulders were broad like a calf. He rushed over with big strides, and his target seemed to be the person next to Ji Dong. "Good brother, hurry up and block for me. I won't forget your benefit." Bissot shrank behind Ji Dong and revealed half of his head. He shouted at the red-haired young man who was rushing over, "Car, don't think that I'm afraid of you. Didn't I kick your butt during the entrance exam and make you fall on your face like a dog? I haven't forgotten it yet. This is my boss. If you're so good, beat my boss first." "What boss?" "Beat him up together." The red-haired young man rushed over valiantly. Since Ji Dong was in front of him, he threw a punch. Ji Dong immediately understood that he was being used, but at this time, the young man named Bissot was grabbing his clothes tightly from behind. He couldn't hide even if he wanted to. In his previous life, Ji Dong was a fighting expert when he was young. At that time, because he was tall and handsome, all the girls in school liked him. It was inevitable that some of the boys would be jealous of him. Although he didn't know any tricks, he definitely had a lot of fighting experience. Seeing the red-haired young man Car throw a punch at him, Ji Dong knew very well that with his current physical condition, if he was hit, even if he didn't faint, he wouldn't be able to bear it. It was better to be used than to be beaten. He reacted immediately, lifted his right leg and kicked forward. "You're taller than me, but your arms aren't as long as my legs, right?" Bang! Without error, Ji Dong's kick landed right on the red-haired young man's lower abdomen. The red-haired young man was indeed strong, and Ji Dong's body wasn't very good. Although the red-haired young man was kicked down by him, he also fell back from the huge impact. "Ouch, I fell to my death." Ji Dong fell, but he wasn't the one who screamed. Bissot was grabbing his clothes from behind. This time, he was too smart for his own good, and he became the scapegoat for Ji Dong. Ji Dong immediately got up from the ground and rushed towards the red-haired young man. From his figure, he could tell that the red-haired young man wasn't easy to deal with. He kicked him, and even if he was used, the red-haired young man would still think that he was on the same side as Bissot. Since that was the case, he might as well fight first. When Bissot saw Ji Dong pounce on him, he was stunned for a moment, but he immediately followed suit. He didn't turn around to escape. It was 2 against 1. Although the red-haired young man was slightly taller, he still couldn't take it. Ji Dong was still fine as he attacked head-on, but Bissot was very insidious, and he targeted vital points. Although they were both young, and their punches weren't heavy, the red-haired young man didn't dare to let them hit him. In the end, he occasionally returned a punch, but most of the time, he used his hands to protect his lower body. "What are you doing? All of you, stop!" A thunderous roar rang out. Before Ji Dong could react, his body flew up like a cloud. When his feet landed on the ground, he saw an extremely burly man, one in each hand, grabbing him and Bissot. With the tip of his foot, Car also stood up. Bissot had the upper hand, and he was very pleased with himself. He looked at Car with a disdainful expression. Car's eyes were spitting fire, and he was about to rush forward, but the burly man's foot tapped on his shoulder, and he couldn't move. "You guys aren't bad, fighting on the first day of school. Stand properly." The burly man, like Carl, had short red hair. But compared to him, Carl paled in comparison. This man looked to be in his 30s. If Carl was a calf, then he would be the strongest bull. He had the head of a leopard and the eyes of a tiger, and he exuded an aura of majesty without being angry. "You like to fight, don't you? Very good. Yin and Yang magician who doesn't like to fight is not qualified. There will be plenty of opportunities for you guys to fight in the future. However, you guys have the guts to fight in public on the school field. Since you violated the school rules, the 3 of you don't have to attend the start-of-term ceremony. Immediately, right now, immediately, turn around and run 20 laps around the field. If you can't finish, go home and find your mother. The last one to finish will run 5 more laps, and this will be your start-of-term ceremony. Begin." Bissot was the first to rush out without hesitation. Although Ji Dong complained about his bad luck, he had thought about it very clearly these days. Since everything had to start over, he had to start all over again. In desperation, he had to run out. The red-haired car glared at them angrily and followed them. There were 2 sports fields in the Fire Academy, one for the Fuhua series and the other for the 3rd Fire series. At this time, they were running on the field for the 3rd Fire series, which was not big. 1 lap was 200 meters, but 20 laps was 4,000 meters. For a 10-year-old child, especially a weak one like Ji Dong, it was definitely a great challenge. Many new and old students on the sports field saw this scene. The old students were snickering, and the new students looked at the burly middle-aged man with some fear. Staring fiercely, the middle-aged man roared, "What are you looking at? Do you want to run laps too? Get the hell to the auditorium of the teaching building to attend the start-of-term ceremony. Immediately, right now, immediately. I'll count to 10. If you see someone else here, run laps with them." No matter which year the students were from, they all dispersed at the same time. No one wanted to be the next unlucky one. The burly man touched his face and said, "Am I so terrible? I'm just a little fat on my face, humph." As he spoke, he looked at the 3 running around, especially at Ji Dong. He chuckled and said, "These 3 brats aren't bad, they have the same style as me when I was young, daring to fight on the first day of school. Very good, especially the skinniest one, that kick of his is really vicious. I couldn't tell, he's not that big, but he's so tough when it comes to fighting. Why didn't I remember there was such a student in the entrance exam at the end of last year?" As soon as they started running, the gap in physical fitness was revealed. There was no doubt that the red-haired car's calf-like body was not in vain. He ran with great strength, and every step seemed to bounce his body on the ground. Although he started last, he soon overtook Ji Dong and Bis So, running in the front. Although Bis So was not as strong as Car, his footsteps were very light. He was not too far behind Car, and it was quite easy. Ji Dong, who was at the back, did not dare to compliment them. At the beginning, he was fine. He had been training for the past few days. After 3 or 4 laps, he did not feel anything and could just barely keep up with the 2 in front. After the 5th lap, Ji Dong's breathing became heavy. His legs felt like they were filled with lead, and his clothes were soaked in sweat. The distance between him and Car and Bis So was getting farther and farther. After the 9th lap, Car had overtaken Ji Dong by 1 lap. Not only did he not slow down, but he ran faster and faster. When Bis So overtook Ji Dong by 1 lap, he followed him and looked at him with a puzzled look. "Brother, your body is not good. How did you pass the physical fitness test during the entrance exam? You helped me just now. Thanks." Ji Dong glanced at him and said while panting, "Since you didn't abandon me and run away when we were fighting just now, forget it, I won't argue with you." Bis So patted his not-so-firm chest and said, "Why would I run? Am I that kind of person?" Ji Dong said in a bad mood, "You kind of look like that. Come on, do you want me to help you?" As he spoke, Bis So wanted to support Ji Dong's right shoulder and help him bear part of his body weight. Ji Dong dodged his hand and said, "No need, I can do it. You run first, don't worry about me." The middle-aged man standing in the middle of the field obviously saw the situation and said, "What are you doing? Hurry up and run. Do you want to get punished?" Bis So stuck out his tongue and sped up again, chasing Car who was in front of him. On the 15th lap, Ji Dong's physical strength was completely exhausted, and his speed was greatly reduced. However, he had no intention of giving up. If he wanted to become a yin and yang magician, he had to put in 32 times the effort of a genius. Today's punishment was just the beginning. The middle-aged man stood in the middle of the field and looked at the 3 people running. At the beginning, he admired Ji Dong the most because he was the most direct in fighting. However, after running, he saw the problem. It was obvious that Car and Bis So had excellent physical fitness. Running 20 laps was nothing, but that skinny student was obviously having difficulty running. How did such a student pass the entrance exam? However, the middle-aged man's thoughts quickly changed. With his experience, of course, He could see that Ji Dong's physical strength had been overdrawn, but he still persisted. He didn't have the slightest intention of stopping or begging for mercy. What a persistent perseverance! Although his physical fitness was not as good as the other two, his persistence was enough to make the middle-aged man secretly nod his head. When Ji Dong finished his 16th lap, Car and Bissau had already completed their punishment. Unexpectedly, Bissau's acceleration at the end was extremely strong, and he actually ran on par with Car. Ji Dong continued to take firm steps forward. Suddenly, he realized that his body seemed to have become lighter, and running was no longer as difficult as before. A thought flashed through his mind. Limit, did I break through my limit? He knew that in this kind of aerobic exercise the human body would reach a limit. Breaking through this limit was equivalent to breaking through oneself. His footsteps were much lighter, and his breathing didn't seem to be that difficult. From the 17th to the 20th lap, it was obvious that it was much easier for him to run, and he managed to persevere. However, the punishment wasn't over yet. As the last person to finish, he still had to receive an additional 5 laps of punishment. When Ji Dong started to run his second lap, a figure suddenly caught up to him. "What are you doing?" Ji Dong turned his head and looked at Bissau, who was following him. Bissau smiled and said, "This happened because of me. You're the one who caused this. How can I let you be punished alone? Let's go together." Before he finished speaking, the red-haired Car had already appeared on the other side of Ji Dong. As he ran, he said, "I'm not here to accompany you. I just want to prove that with my physical strength, I won't run any less than you." Although he said so, Car's speed was always the same as Bissau's, and he maintained the same speed as Ji Dong's. The three of them ran side by side. Chapter 7. "Okay, the three of you come here." The tough teacher waved to Ji Dong and the other two. The three looked at each other and ran over. Stopping, Ji Dong only felt that his whole body had a feeling of floating, as if his 2 legs were not his, but the carefree feeling still made him feel a lot better. The intrepid teacher glanced at the three of them and snorted. "Today, I'll teach you a lesson. Remember this well. If you want to fight in the future, you have to report to me first. I'll find a place for you to fight to your heart's content." Bissau quickly smiled and said, "Teacher, we dare not in the future." "Dare not? Didn't you just fight very happily?" "To tell you the truth, I never hate naughty students, I only hate those who don't work hard. If you want to always win in a fight, you have to work harder in cultivation in the future. My name is Xia Tian, the fiery Xia Tian. I am the Dean of the 3rd Fire Department, and also the class teacher and instructor of the 3rd Fire Department of the 1st grade. Remember my name. You are a Fuhua series, right? Remember, I hate sissy. Speak louder when you talk to me in the future, understand?" "Understood." Bissau hurriedly answered loudly, but in his heart he was cursing. The guy in front of him was simply a bigger Car. Xia Tian snorted and said, "Get out of here. You don't have to go to the boring opening ceremony. Go get your school uniform and go back to the dormitory. I want to remind you that the strictest rule of the school is that you are not allowed to go out of the school gate at will." "Yes." Ji Dong and the other two responded at the same time. The three looked at each other and clearly saw the joy in each other's eyes. It was obviously not a bad thing to not have to listen to the boring opening ceremony. Bissau and Car cheered and pulled Ji Dong to run to the teaching building. Looking at the direction in which they left, Xia Tian's fat face showed a smile and said, "These 3 little bastards are really energetic. I hope they are teachable." As Ji Dong and the other two walked to the teaching building, Bissau coughed and looked over Ji Dong to Car. He said, "Well, Car, how about we stop here today?" Car snorted and said, "Sissy, you want to retreat after taking advantage of me? Last time you ran in front of me during the entrance exam and kicked me. As a result, you robbed me of the 1st place in physical strength. I haven't settled it with you yet. Today I was beaten by you for nothing. Do you want to just let it go?" Bissot smiled and said, "Let bygones be bygones. Besides, who doesn't have a little ambition? You can only blame yourself for being careless. Moreover, you can't beat both of us now." Jidong glanced at him and said lightly, "Don't drag me into this. I just met you a second before he rushed up." Although Carr looked fierce, he was not that kind of stupid person. He immediately understood and was about to attack Bissot, but Jidong grabbed his shoulder. Jidong said, however, "We don't get to know each other without fighting. How about this, didn't he kick you? You kick him back now. As for today's fight, you rushed up first. After you kick him, let's forget about the past and be friends." Brother, how can you betray me?" Bissot turned his head and wanted to run, but he was held back by Jidong. "You have to bear the consequences of what you have done. Do you want to have a friend in the future or an enemy all the time?" Looking at the calm light in Jidong's eyes, Bissot was stunned for a moment. Then he looked at Carr, who was already eager to fight, and said helplessly, "It's my bad luck. I originally wanted to use you, but I didn't expect that not only would I become a scapegoat, but I would also be beaten back. Brother Carr, you have to be gentle." As he spoke, Bissot held his head with both hands, turned around and squatted on the ground like a rascal, and pointed his butt in the direction of Carr and Jidong. Jidong looked at him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This guy was really a clown. Carr had already lifted his right leg, but he didn't kick him in the end. Instead, he stretched his hand under Bissot's butt and lifted him up again. "I'm too lazy to argue with you." Carr glared at Bissot angrily. Bissot didn't suffer any physical pain, and was immediately overjoyed. He took advantage of the opportunity and said, "So, we are friends in the future?" Carr snorted and said, "Who is a friend of a sissy?" Bissot said angrily, "Don't sissies have human rights? A sissy is also a human. Do you think I want to? Who told me to have more than 80% Yin attribute, and because of the influence of Yin Qi, my voice is a little softer, but I am a pure man." Carr was a little surprised and said, "You have 20% Fuhua series?" Bissot's mood changed very quickly. When he heard Carr's question, he immediately became proud and said, "Of course. To be precise, my fourth fire accounts for 85%. If I use one word to describe it, it is genius. Among the freshmen in this year's fourth fire class, my talent should be the best." Carr curled his lips disdainfully and said, "Isn't it just 85% fourth fire? I am also 85% third fire. You see, why am I not bragging?" Listening to the two quarreling, Jidong couldn't help but laugh and said, "Then what are you doing now?" Although he said so, he was secretly surprised. According to the yin and yang ratio that Dean Yang Bingtian said, the two in front of him were undoubtedly genius-level yin and yang magician, and almost certainly could condense a yin-yang crown. Carr blushed and said, "I just can't stand him like that. By the way, I still don't know your name. Are you third fire or Fuhua series?" "My name is Jidong. To be precise, both of you are my classmates. I am a third and fourth fire double cultivator." "Impossible," Carr and Bissot said almost in unison. Jidong said lightly, "Haven't you heard of the balance of yin and yang? You are allowed to be geniuses, but am I not allowed to be trash?" As he said this, he was the first to walk into the teaching building. Carr and Bissot looked at each other. At this time, there was no hostility in their eyes. Looking at Jidong's somewhat desolate back, the two almost at the same time chased after him. Bissot couldn't help but ask, "Jidong, are you really yin and yang balanced? But, with a body like yours, how did you get accepted by the academy?" Jidong said very naturally, "I got in through the back door. I am a working student. I only wanted to try with my own strength. Is it really impossible to become a yin and yang magician with the balance of yin and yang? All I need is to put in 32 times the effort, that's all." 32 times the effort? That's all? Are you crazy? Bissot stared blankly at Jidong. Carr glared at him and said, "You are the crazy one. Ji-dong, I support you. My mother once said that as long as you work hard, you won't lose out even if you don't succeed. If there is anything you need help with, don't hesitate to ask. Not to be outdone, Bissot said. Me too. From now on, we are brothers. Ji-dong looked at the two of them and didn't say anything. Instead, he stretched out his right hand. Car and Bissot put their hands almost at the same time, but Bissot's reaction was a bit faster. 3 hands of different sizes stacked on top of each other. Looking at each other, they laughed together. When they came to the administration office to collect their uniforms and class schedules, there was a small interlude. Bissot and Car both got their own departments, but Ji-dong wanted to get 2 departments at the same time. When he handed over the admission notice specially made for him by Yang Bingtian, the administration office teacher looked at him as if he was looking at a monster. The opening ceremony is in the morning, and we have to go to class in the afternoon. Does the academy have any humanity? They don't even let us rest. Bissot looked at the class schedule and wailed. Ji-dong glanced at him and said, "If you have the ability, shout louder." Bissot muttered, "I'm just complaining. However, the class in the afternoon is also good. It's rare that the 3rd Fire Department and the Fuhua series have a big class together. There are not many times in the whole school year. What are we going to do now?" Car said, "Let's go to my dormitory. Anyway, there is no one at this time." Bissot curled his lips and said, "Forget it. Your 3rd Fire Department is mostly male students. What's the point? It's better to go to my dormitory. Most of our Fuhua series are female students, and there are many beautiful ones. I'm the only one in my dormitory, unlike you who have to squeeze 4 people into a room." Car said, "Sissy, forget it. If I go to your Fuhua series, won't I be contaminated with Inchi? F***ck Car, if you call me Sissy again, I'll fight with you." "Okay, don't quarrel. Come to my place. My place is the quietest. I'll treat you to a drink." Ji-dong's words made Bissot and Car quiet down. They looked at each other and asked in a low voice, "Where can you drink?" Ji-dong said doubtfully, "What's wrong?" Carl said mysteriously, "Alcohol is forbidden in the academy. We were searched when we walked through the school gate. But we're fine. Because we're young, the search wasn't strict. Those seniors are very strict. If there's alcohol to drink, you'll be my boss in the future. When I was 5 years old, my father began to give me alcohol. This is the most painful thing for me when I entered the school." Bissot grabbed Ji-dong's left arm and said, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." When Ji-dong took them to his room on the top floor of the 3rd Fire Department's teaching building, when Car and Bissot saw at least hundreds of bottles of all kinds of wine on the wine cabinet, their hearts had been conquered by Ji-dong. Of course, there was also some meat with sauce that Yang Bingtian had prepared for himself. Although Ji-dong did not approve of drinking cocktails and eating meat, it did not matter as lunch. After noon, the first class of the new year at the Fire Academy began. Both Car and Bissot sat at the back of the classroom with silly smiles on their faces. If you looked closely, you could clearly see that the 2 boys were dizzy. Ji-dong did not sit with them, but sat in front of them. One reason was that he was thin, and the other was that he wanted to be able to listen to the class better. Being 32 times more diligent was not something that could be easily achieved. Bissot whispered, "Car, Big Brother said that the wine we drank would not have the smell of alcohol. Is it true?" Car said grumpily, "You can smell it yourself. Big Brother will not lie to you. However, I have never drunk such a good wine. It is too hot, too sensational." Bissot said, "Big Brother said that the wine we drank would be drunk after a while. Why am I still dizzy?" Car seemed to have sobered up a little at this time. He said, "That's because you are bad at drinking. Look, I am fine. I have decided to follow Brother Ji-dong from now on. Follow Brother Ji-dong, eat meat and drink good wine. Immediately, right now, all of you, be quiet. Whoever dares to whisper to each other, go out and run circles under the sun." The loud voice echoed in the large classroom, and the originally chaotic scene suddenly quieted down. Without looking, Ji Dong knew who it was just by listening to the voice. There were only 61 students in the 3rd Fire Department and the Fuhua Series Department. Of course, Ji Dong was the extra one. The rest were 30 students in the 2 departments, and the same was true for the other years. Therefore, the total number of students in the entire Fire Academy was about 360. Although Ji Dong had 2 sets of school uniforms and 2 schedules, he was wearing the school uniform of the 3rd Fire Department today. The school uniform of the 3rd Fire Department was red, and the Fuhua series was blue. There was no difference in other places. The words Fire Academy were printed on the back. It looked a little silly. This school uniform was definitely not exquisite. However, according to Carr and Bissot, the tuition fee for a year here was as high as 50 gold coins. Even if one had the ability to pass the exam, not everyone could afford it. Moreover, this was not considering the cost of food and accommodation. The currency on the 5 Elements continent was mainly gold coins, but the style of gold coins in each country was different. 1 gold coin was equal to 10 silver coins and 100 copper coins. It was said that there was also a 5-element coin that was used throughout the continent. 1 gold coin was equal to 100 gold coins. Mr. Xia Tian wore a red robe and walked to the podium. The clothes he wore were no different from those of Dean Yang Bingtian, except that his bulging muscles could not be completely covered by the robe. His valiant aura was released, and it was naturally easy to frighten the group of children in front of him, who were generally about 10 years old. There was another teacher who walked to the podium with Xia Tian. She was tall, only half a head shorter than Xia Tian. A blue dress perfectly outlined her attractive figure. She looked 27 or 28 years old, but her expression was slightly cold. Xia Xia's powerful gaze swept across the faces of the 61 students below. Suddenly, he slammed the table and let out a strong roar. The thick, solid wooden podium also let out a groan. The sudden explosion startled the students, and the teacher in the blue dress couldn't help but frown. Chapter 8. Who allowed you to sit like this? All stand up. Xia Tian roared, and all the students hurriedly stood up. It turned out that the students of the 2 departments were sitting in a staggered position. There was no rule. The colors of the school uniforms were different. From the position of the podium, it was naturally red and blue. 3rd Fire Department, go to the right, Fuhua series to the left. You know how to match men and women at such a young age? Immediately, I will count to 5. Those who have not sat down, get out of here. Under the roar of Xia Tian, no one dared to neglect. The 61 students suddenly became chaotic and quickly changed their seat. Ji Dong paid special attention to the look of the female teacher, who was obviously Fuhua series. Although Xia Tian's teaching method was very rough, the female teacher looked disapproving. Obviously, she was used to it. Now start the roll call. Those who are called stand up and shout loudly. 3rd Fire Department Carr, here. Carl suddenly stood up from the back row and shouted loudly. The students couldn't help but look at him. Xia Chen nodded in satisfaction and said, "It's just like this. Cheer up for me." Soon, Xia Tian finished calling the names of the first 33rd Fire Department students and said, "The last one, Ji Dong. Here." Ji Dong stood up from the front row. Although his voice was not as loud as Carr's, there was a firmness in his voice that his peers did not have. As soon as Ji Dong stood up, Xia Tian and the female teacher's eyes focused on him at the same time. Xia Tian was a little surprised and said, "You are Ji Dong?" "Yes." Ji Dong's answer was simple and powerful. Xia Tian nodded and said, "Sit down." Ji Dong could see that Xia Tian's expression was a little strange after knowing his name. He didn't have to guess to know that it must have something to do with his yin and yang balance attribute. "My name is Xia Tian. In the future, I will lead your first grade 3rd Fire series. If you don't work hard, don't blame me for being rude. I will kick you out at any time, so that you don't waste your parents' hard-earned money here. Next, the Chiu Tian teacher of the Fuhua series will call the roll. Ji Dong almost burst out laughing. He thought to himself, what kind of names are these? One is Xia Tian and the other is Chiu Tian. What a perfect match. I wonder if there's a spring and winter in the academy. Ji Dong. He was the first name that Chiu Tian read out. Here. Ji Dong, who had just sat down, had to stand up again. Except for Car and Bissot, all the other students thought they had heard wrong and stared at him dumbfoundedly. Chiu Tian smiled slightly. Her smile was as beautiful and moving as her voice. She said, "You don't need to be surprised. Ji Dong is a special case. His cultivation method will be different from all of you. This is a new attempt by the academy. Okay, you sit down. Next, Bissot." Here. Bissot quickly bounced up and looked at Chiu Tian with shining eyes. He said, "Sister Chiu Tian, hello." Chiu Tian giggled and said, "Call me teacher." Just as Bissot was about to say something, he saw Xia Tian's murderous eyes looking at him. He quickly sat back down. Car, who was sitting on the right, whispered to him, "Now I'm a little envious of the Fuhua series." The roll call ended quickly. Ji Dong ignored the strange looks that the students around him were giving him. Although teacher Chiu Tian didn't say it clearly, anyone with a little knowledge of yin and yang magician would know that Ji Dong's dual-element cultivation would only result in a 50-50 balance of yin and yang physique. Without a doubt, he was a top-notch trash. Of course, most people were just curious. After all, a physique with a balance of yin and yang was even rarer than a peerless genius with a ratio of 9-1. After the roll call, the class officially began. Xia Tian turned around and wrote 5 lines of words on the blackboard. He wrote, Eastern Jia Yi Wood, Southern Bing Ding Fire, Central Wu Ji Earth, Western Gung Xian Metal, Northern Ringui Water. After writing all of this, he turned around. Teacher Chiu also naturally retreated to the side. Xia's gaze swept across the students and said, "Today is your first lesson in the Distant Fire Academy, and it is also a big lesson for both departments. Now, which of you can tell me what the meaning of these 5 lines of words I wrote is?" No one knew whether it was because Xia Tian's simple and violent behavior scared these kids, but most of the students chose to wait and see. Ji Dong, who was sitting in the front row, raised his hand without hesitation. Since he had decided to work hard, he needed to acquire enough knowledge. He needed to work 32 times harder, and he also needed a direction to work hard. Xia Tian Hyoheim nodded and said, "All right, go ahead." Ji Dong stood up and said, "The 5 lines written by teacher represent the 5 directions of east, south, west, north, and center, as well as the 5 elements of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, as well as the 10 heavenly stems of A, B, C, D, E, G, Gung, Xian, Run, and Gui. According to the meaning of the words, if we take our fire attribute as an example, the south is fire, and the heavenly stems of C and D are also fire, but according to yin and yang, they are divided into 2 different kinds of fire, C and D. Therefore, the southern C and D fire can also be called the southern yang and yin fire. The heavenly stems of C and D are just 2 names, so the other 4 elements should have the same meaning. In the 10 heavenly stems, the odd number should represent the yang attribute, and the even number should represent the yin attribute. For example, the first element A and B wood, a wood should be yang wood, and B wood should be yin wood. Xia Tian nodded approvingly and said, "Very good, sit down." What Ji Dong said was based on his understanding of yin and yang and the 5 elements from his previous life, as well as some of the knowledge about the yin and yang magician that he heard from Yang Bingtian, and combined with the 5 lines written by Xia Tian. Xia Tian said, "Ji Dong is right, our continent is called the 5 elements continent." What are the 5 elements? They are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, and the 5 elements are divided into yin and yang attribute. After each element is divided into yin and yang, it becomes 10 elements, which are yang wood, yang fire, yang earth, yang metal, yang water, and water. These are the 10 elements of our yin and yang magician. Speaking of this, he paused, and then wrote another 20 words on the blackboard. These are the attributes of all the 10 elements of yin and yang magician. The heavenly stems correspond to the 5 elements and yin and yang. Just now, Jidong said very clearly that the first and second elements are wood, which is yang wood and yin wood. The third and fourth elements are fire, which is yang fire and yin fire. If we put the 10 heavenly stems into the classification of our yin and yang magician, the real names appear, which are: first wood series, second wood series, third fire series, fuhua series, fifth earth series, sixth earth series, seventh metal series, eighth metal series, eighth metal series, ninth water series, and 10th water series. In our southern fire empire, almost all the people have the fire attribute. Therefore, our Fire Academy naturally only teaches the third Fire series and Fuhua series, which are the Yin and Yang Magician series that you belong to. The other 8 elements belong to the other empires. Xia Tian drew a large rectangle on the other side of the blackboard, and then divided the rectangle into 5 parts according to the top, bottom, left, and center. At the bottom, he wrote the words, Southern Fire Empire. If our 5 elements continent is a rectangle, then our Southern Fire Empire is naturally in the southernmost part. The southernmost part belongs to the fire attribute, which is most suitable for people with the fire attribute to live. So on and so forth. I think you should understand the origins of the other 4 empires. That's right, they are the northernmost North Water Empire, the westernmost West Gold Empire, the easternmost East Wood Empire, and the Middle Earth Empire, which occupies the largest area in the center of the continent. That's how our 5 elements continent got its name. As he spoke, he wrote down the names of the 4 empires on the other 4 sections. At the same time, he also marked out the location of Lai Fire City on the west side of the Southern Fire Empire. He pointed the pen in his hand and said, "Our Lai Fire City is here." Who doesn't understand what I just said? If you don't understand, just say it now. I won't repeat these basic things in the future. Jidong had to admit that this rough and hot-tempered teacher Xia Tian was very rational when he was teaching. He went from shallow to deep, simple and easy to understand. Through words, diagrams, and explanations, he clearly explained the 10 elements of the Yin and Yang magician and the origins of the 5 empires in the 5 elements continent. The students who could pass the exam were definitely not idiots, and none of them raised any questions. Okay, since no one has any questions, then let's continue. Guys of the third fire element, listen carefully, I'm going to talk about our third fire element. At the mention of the third fire element, Xia Tian was obviously in high spirit. His voice also raised a few octaves as he said, "The third fire element represents the yang fire, the fire of extreme yang and hardness. Just like the sunlight of the sun, it's full of heat energy that radiates outwards. The meaning of the third fire element in the heavenly stem is the sun. Therefore, among the 10 elements of the Yin and Yang magician, in terms of single-target attack ability, we are second only to the gung metal element, but in terms of all-out attack ability, we are definitely the strongest. At the same time, according to the mutual restraint of the 5 elements, our third fire element is the perfect counter to the gung metal element. Therefore, it's not wrong to say that we are the Yin and Yang magician with the best attack. You all have to remember the word yang, not only in your ability in the future, but also in your mentality. Only with a body of yang can you bring out the fierceness and hardness of the third fire element." Teacher Qiu Tian walked to Xia Tian's side and said with a smile, "Teacher Xia Tian has just introduced the third fire element to the students of the third fire element. Now let me also introduce our fourth fire element. It's the same type of fire, but because of the difference between yin and yang, it's different. If the third fire element belongs to the day, then our fourth fire element belongs to the night. Although we are not as fierce as the third fire element, we have the strongest adhesion and corrosiveness among the 10 elements of yin and yang magic powers. In an instant attack, we naturally can't be compared with the third fire element. However, once the enemy is hit by our fourth fire element, then it has to endure continuous burning. The third fire element and the fourth fire element have their own characteristics, just like the 10 elements of yin and yang magic powers have their own characteristic. The 5 elements restrain each other, and there's no absolute strongest magic power. However, what I want to tell you is that no matter which element you cultivate, when you can go against the mutual restraint of the 5 elements, then you can become the strongest. At this time, Teacher Xia Tian had retreated to the side and handed the lecture to Qiu Tian. Teacher Qiu Tian continued, "What I'm going to talk about is also the most important content of today's class. Please listen carefully, and if you have any questions, ask immediately, because this will determine whether you can successfully graduate from the Fire Academy and become a real yin and yang magician." Speaking of this, the smile on Qiu Tian's face disappeared, and she said in a deep voice, "I believe that most of you have heard of the yin-yang crown and know that it's the symbol of yin and yang magician. Next, I'm going to talk about the real meaning of the yin-yang crown, its specific classification, and its use." While speaking, Qiu Tian walked out from behind the podium and nodded to Xia Tian. The two stood 5 meters apart, shoulder to shoulder, and at the same time, they slowly raised their arms from both sides with their palms facing up. Puff! In the midst of the students' exclamations, a ball of red flame appeared on each of Xia Tian's palms, while a ball of blue flame appeared on each of Qiu Tian's palms. The dazzling light of the flames instantly attracted the attention of all the students. A strong red light and a dense blue light also rose from the bodies of the two teachers. Ji Dong, who was sitting in the front row, could clearly feel that the red light released by Xia Tian was the same as the one released by Yang Bingtian the other day. Both were filled with aggressive heat, and the intense red flame caused the temperature in the air to rise rapidly. On the other hand, the blue light on Qiu Tian's body and the blue flame on his palms seemed to have no heat at all. On the surface, they were not as magnificent and blazing as Xia Tian's red flame, but they gave off a deep sense of fear. Even when looking at the blue flame, one would feel a chill down one's spine. Obviously, this was the third fire, which represented Yang fire, and the fourth fire, which represented Yin fire. However, no matter which type of fire it was, when they released their magic power, the red and blue flames were surrounded by a faint golden edge. A transparent shadow appeared behind Xia Tian and Qiu Tian, and the color of the shadow was the same as the color of their magic power. At this moment, Ji Dong could see the difference between them and Yang Bingtian. They were both of the third fire element, but the shadow of the firebird behind Xia Tian was much fainter than that of Yang Bingtian. The firebird released by Yang Bingtian was not transparent, but the firebird behind Xia Tian was like a faint airflow. The shadow that appeared behind Autumn was not a firebird, but a large blue snake. It was also very illusory, and its appearance could not be seen clearly. Chapter 9. Ji Dong looked at Qiu Tian in surprise. In his memory, there was another name for the southern Bing Ding Hua, which was the southern vermilion bird Bing Ding Hua, just like the eastern azure dragon Jiaimu. In other words, in his memory, the mythical beast of Bing Hua and Ding Hua should be the vermilion bird, which was also the phoenix. The shadow behind Xia Tian and Yang Bingtian was undoubtedly the phoenix. But why did Qiu Tian, the yin and yang magician of the Fuhua series, have a big blue snake behind his back? Moreover, this snake seemed to have a pair of very light-colored wings. Red light and blue light condensed above the heads of the two teachers, and a crown appeared on each of their heads. The moment the crown appeared, it immediately became the center of their magic power. The crown that appeared on the head of Xia Tian was the same as that of Din Yang Bingtian. It was entirely white, covered with golden edges, and had 9 vertical points. Each point also had a red bead on it. The only difference was the flame pattern on the points and the number of stars on the front of the crown. The crown on Xia Tian's head only had 3 points with a red flame brand, but the number of stars on the ring below was as many as 4, which was half a star more than that of Din Yang Bingtian. On the other side, the crown on the head of Qiu Tian was the first time that Ji Dong saw it. The crown was entirely black, covered with golden edges, and had 9 vertical points. However, on each point there was a blue bead. Among them, there were also 3 points with a flame pattern on them, but they were also blue. On the ring below there were 2.5 stars. His entire body was enveloped in a red light, and the blazing flames on his palms made Xia Xia look like a fire god descending. His originally extremely valiant appearance looked even more tyrannical, and even his eyes had a tinge of red as he said, "See? This is the full combat state of the Bing Fire series Yin and Yang Magician and the Fuhua series Yin and Yang Magician." As he said that, Xia Tian raised his hand, and the crown on his head flew down and landed in his hand. He said, "Of the 10 series Yin and Yang Magician, 5 are Yang and the other 5 are Yin. What I'm releasing now is the Yang crown of the Bing Fire series, and what Teacher Qiu Tian is releasing is the Yin crown of the Fuhua series. Whether it is the Yang crown or the Yin crown, they are the source of the Yin and Yang Magician's power. Whether or not the Yin and Yang Magician can form a Yin-Yang crown is the most basic requirement." He held his Yang crown with one hand, and pointed at the 5-centimeter wide ring below it. He said, "Whether it is the Yang crown or the Yin crown, they are divided into 4 parts. First, the ring you see is called the crown ring. It is the foundation of the Yin and Yang crown. Every crown ring has 9 peaks. We call them the crown peaks. They are the 9 triangular peaks. They combine together to form the most basic Yin and Yang crown. You can see the 4 stars on my crown ring. They are called crown stars, and the flame brand on the crown peaks, we call them crowns. These represent the level of the Yin and Yang Magician. The crown stars represent the basic level of the Yin and Yang Magician. It is divided into 10 levels, from 1 to 10. You have to remember clearly, a crown star does not represent 1 level, but 2 levels. For example, my Yang crown has 4 crown stars. It means that my title has reached the 8th level. I have 3 crown peaks that have the flame brand of the Bing Fire series. This is called 3 crowns. The number of crown peaks that have this brand are called crowns. Every time we cultivate to 5 crown stars, which is the 10th level, then through a special cultivation method, we can obtain a crown. At the same time, our Yin and Yang Magician title will also change. Teacher Qiu Tian also took the Yin crown on his head into his hand, and continued Xia Tian's words, saying, "No matter what kind of Yin and Yang Magician, we all have the same level classification. According to the difference in cultivation, we have different titles. Students like you who have just started to cultivate, or those who have not condensed a Yin-Yang crown, we are collectively called apprentices. Those of the Bing Fire series are Bing Fire apprentices, and those of the Fuhua series are Ding Fire apprentices. When you have your own crown stars, you can add the level in front of it. For example, half a crown star is a level 1 Bing Fire apprentice or a level 1 Ding Fire apprentice. When you cultivate to the 5-star level 10 apprentice, and then condense your own Yin-Yang crown, then your title will change accordingly. At that time, you will have a crown, and the 5 crown stars will disappear. When you cultivate another 5 crown stars level 10, you will be promoted again and reach 2 crowns. The title of our Yin and Yang Magician changes according to the number of crowns. From low to high they are Apprentice, Scholar, Master, Master, Grandmaster, Great Grandmaster, Heavenly Scholar, Heavenly Master, Heavenly Master, Heavenly Master, Heavenly Master, Heavenly Master, Heavenly Master, exclusive title. Xia Tian continued. Therefore, all my titles in the Yin and Yang Magician world should be 3 crowns Yang Crown Level 8 3rd Fire Series Master, and teacher Chiu Tian's title is 3 Crowns Een Crown Level 5 Fuhua Series Master. Today is your first class, and that's all the theoretical knowledge. Now if there is anything you don't understand, you can ask Teacher Chiu Tian and I will answer for you. As he said that, he and Chiu Tian both withdrew their magic power, and the Yang crown and Een crown also disappeared. The first to ask a question was still Ji Dong. An ordinary 10-year-old child, especially in a new environment for the first time, would more or less have some stage fright, but this obviously wouldn't happen to him, whose mental age was over 30 years old. As soon as Xia Tian finished speaking, he immediately raised his hand and asked, Teacher Xia Tian, I have 3 questions. First, of the 10 Yin and Yang magician titles that you mentioned earlier, what is the last exclusive title? That should only be available after achieving 9 crowns, right? Xia Tian was stunned for a moment, then laughed. You're thinking too far, kid. 9 crowns, that is only a legend, and also the ultimate goal that all of us Yin and Yang magicians yearn for. To be honest, you don't need to know, but since you asked, I can tell you that for the 10 Yin and Yang magicians who practice to the highest level of 9 crowns, the exclusive title will be different. Our 3rd Fire Series exclusive title is Merit Cauldron. The exclusive title of the Fuhua Series exclusive title is Taichung. As for the other series, even I am not very clear. There was a glimmer of light in Ji Dong's eyes, and he said, My second question is, behind you and Teacher Chiu Tian just appeared an illusory light and shadow. Behind you is a big red bird, behind Teacher Chiu Tian is a big snake that seems to have grown wings. What is going on? This time it was Teacher Chiu Tian who answered his question. Ji Dong, your observation is very detailed. However, as the saying goes, don't bite off more than you can chew. Your question is also what we will talk about in the next class. Our second class will be about the totem of our series and the role of the Yin and Yang corona. You will understand when the time comes. Ji Dong nodded and said, My last question is, although both of you belong to the 3rd Fire Series and the Fuhua Series, I just noticed that when you release your Yang corona and Yin corona, there is something similar. Whether it is your Yang corona or your magic, there will be a faint golden edge around it. What is that? Hearing Ji Dong's question, Xia Tian and Chiu Tian's expressions changed at the same time. They looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Xia Tian said in a low voice, You don't need to know this now. If you have the ability to become a real Yin and Yang magician in the future, and get into a higher school for further study, the teachers there will tell you. Ji Dong had been observing carefully. With his extraordinary observation skills, he found that when he mentioned the golden edge, Xia Tian and Chiu Tian's expressions became a little unnatural. There seemed to be a little excitement in their eyes, but also a little fear. What the hell is going on? He was really curious. Since they were not willing to say, he would go back and ask Director Yang Bingtian at night. Xia Tian said, Well, that's all I've taught you today. You can discuss freely in the remaining time. If there is anything you don't understand, you can come to the front and ask. Ji Dong, come with me. After that, he walked out of the classroom first, while Mr. Chiu Tian stayed behind to answer various questions for the students. Ji Dong followed Xia Tian out of the classroom. After Xia Tian left the classroom, he took him directly upstairs without saying a word or looking back at him. Ji Dong's heart moved slightly. When he was punished to run in the morning, it seemed that this Xia Tian had a good impression of him, Bissot and Carr. But now he seemed to be hiding some resentment. Was it related to him? Xia Tian took Ji Dong to the 2nd floor of the teaching building of the 3rd Fire Department and walked into a small classroom. There were no tables and chairs in the classroom. It was about 30 square meters, but there were 10 futons on the ground. On the door of the classroom, there was a phoenix pattern that symbolized the 3rd Fire Department. Xia Tian pointed to a futon in the center and said, Sit down with your legs crossed. Ji Dong did as he was told. Xia Tian sat down opposite him, and stared at Ji Dong with his big, bell-like eyes. If it was an ordinary 10-year-old boy, he would definitely be flustered by his stare, but Ji Dong did not flinch at all when facing Dean Yang Bingtian. Although Xia Tian looked fierce, he could not take away his will. Xia Tian snorted coldly and said, "No wonder you were so weak when you were punished to run in the morning. It turns out that you got in through the back door. I really don't know what the dean is thinking. Where did he find a weirdo like you and still wants to train you with all his strength?" Through the back door? Ji Dong felt a little strange to use these 3 words on himself, but in fact, he did enter the Fire Academy through the back door. Unable to refute Xia Tian, he could only remain silent, and there was no dissatisfaction in his expression. "For the sake of the dean, I will give you this opportunity. However, I want to warn you in advance that if you do not show certain results in a year, I will still not hesitate to kick you out of the 3rd Fire Department. Even the dean can't stop it." Ji Dong still did not speak. Any guarantee or explanation was meaningless. Only strength and results mattered. Seeing that Ji Dong did not say anything and still looked indifferent, Xia Tian could not help feeling a little strange. He put his hand into his pocket and took out 2 things. With his palm facing up, the 2 things were presented in front of Ji Dong. Looking at them, Ji Dong found that they were 2 special gems, one was white and the other was black. They looked exactly the same as the ones released by Xia Tian and Qiu Tian, but 100 times smaller, only the size of a gold coin. The white gem emitted a faint red light, while the black one emitted a faint blue light. They really looked like the miniature versions of the 3rd Fire and Fuhua series Yin-Yang crowns. The only difference was that there was no circle of golden light around the light of these 2 gems, but gray. Just this difference made them different from the Yin-Yang crowns released by the previous 2 teachers. "Teacher Xia Tian, what is this?" Ji Dong asked curiously. Xia Tian looked at the 2 gems, his expression showing some desire, but more solemnity. He said, "You don't need to know what they are. You only need to understand that they can help you open the door of Yin and Yang magician cultivation more easily. This is the dean's own private collection and has nothing to do with the school. I really don't understand why the dean values you so much. How many benefits did your family give to the dean? To actually ask him to take out this pair of crystal crowns, even if they are the lowest quality crystal crowns, each one is worth more than 1,000 gold coins, and there is no market for them. To give them to a trash like you with a yin-yang balanced physique, what a waste!" Hearing Xia Tian's words, Ji Dong couldn't help but praise in his heart. Yang Bingtian was indeed a person who kept his promises. He promised to do his best to help me become a yin and yang magician, and he actually took out such a precious item. It looked like I really have to show some of my abilities and make him a few cups of the highest quality crystal crowns to be worthy of his help. However, facing Xia Tian's disdain, Ji Dong's arrogance was ignited. He coldly said, "Teacher Xia Tian, since this is something that the dean gave me, whether or not it's a waste doesn't seem to have anything to do with you, right? Also, I don't have any family members bribing the dean, I am just an orphan. As for why the dean gave me such a precious item, you can ask him himself. You are a teacher, and I respect you, but to attack a student's fragile heart like this, is that what a teacher should do?" "You." Xia Tian looked at Ji Dong with a strange expression. He suddenly felt that it was funny. In the Fire Academy, he had always been regarded as a fiendish existence by the students. At least a third of the students had been punished by him. Even the higher-grade students who had condensed their yin and yang crowns would tremble in fear when they saw him. But this young boy in front of him, who was only about 10 years old, was actually speaking in front of him and criticizing him. Interesting. Chapter 10. How come I don't see any weakness in your heart? Xia Tian looked at Ji Dong with great interest. At this time, his eyes were even more frightening than before. The 9th rule of the Fire Academy: those who contradict the teacher will be punished. After the business is over, You will run around the field for me until I am satisfied. Of course, I admit that what you said is also reasonable. I was a bit too extreme just now, so I will punish myself. I will run with you without the assistance of magic. For Xia Tian's straightforwardness and courage to admit his mistakes, Ji Dong was very appreciative in his heart. However, he said that running laps was not so fair. Looking at his figure, perhaps this bull-like man wouldn't feel anything even after running 100 laps. However, at this time, Ji Dong's mind was still on the 2 crystal crowns in Xia Tian's hands, so he didn't say anything. Xia Tian became serious, holding a crystal crown in each hand, and said in a deep voice, "You don't need to know the origin of the crystal crown yet. Ordinary students need to feel the existence of the 3rd and 4th fire elements in the air under our guidance at the beginning of cultivation. Only by feeling them can you absorb them into your body through cultivation and use them to improve your strength. However, you have a yin and yang balanced body. Although the 3rd and 4th fire elements are not incompatible like fire and water, because of their balanced characteristics, once the balance is broken, they will interfere with each other, making it impossible for you to feel the existence of these 2 elements in the air. Only through these 2 crystal crowns can you directly have the ability to feel them and have a certain amount of 3rd and 4th fire magic power. From this point, you can save at least a month of time compared to ordinary students. Now, I will use my own magic power to activate these 2 crystal crowns and inject their energy into your body. You have to seriously feel the characteristics of these 2 different magic powers. In the future, no one can help you when you continue to cultivate, you can only rely on yourself. Since you have decided to walk this path, I hope you can bring out the perseverance you had in the morning and work hard." "Yes." Ji Dong straightened his back and replied seriously. "Close your eyes, place your hands flat on your knees, and relax your entire body. No matter what you feel, you have to sit still." Following Xia Tian's instructions, Ji Dong positioned himself and closed his eyes. He had once indulged in alcohol for 20 years, and when it came to concentration, not many people could compare to him. The moment he closed his eyes, his mind had already calmed down. Xia Tian held the 2 crystal crowns in his hands, and his eyes lit up. Suddenly, Ji Dong once again felt the scorching heat from the 3rd fire element. Xia Tian's triple sun crown also reappeared above his head. 2 red flames instantly rose from his palms. The 2 crystal crowns in his hands also instantly lit up, each condensing into a dazzling brilliance. Taking a deep breath, Xia Tian's palms shot out like lightning, simultaneously pressing on the left and right sides of Ji Dong's chest, imprinting the 2 balls of light onto them. Ji Dong's body suddenly trembled. He only felt 2 streams of air pouring into his chest in an instant. One was scorching and the other was warm. The scorching stream of air was full of explosive aura, as if it was going to burn his body to ashes. The warm stream of air was like a spring, instantly pouring into every part of his body. The scorching stream of air exploded in an instant, bringing severe pain to Ji Dong, and the warm stream of air made the blood in his body seem to solidify. His whole body felt like it had fallen into a huge yin and yang furnace and was being calcined. There was no doubt that the scorching stream of air was the 3rd fire magic released through the crystal crown, and the other warm stream of air was the 4th fire magic. After these 2 magic entered Ji Dong's body, they immediately spread along the meridians in his body. The heat that was sometimes manic and sometimes feminine was constantly alternating. Ji Dong's body spasmed uncontrollably. The hands on his knees suddenly grabbed his pants, but he still clenched his teeth and struggled to hold on. Xia Tian was also very nervous. It was not the first time he used the crystal crown, but it was definitely the first time to use the crystal crown of yin and yang attributes for a person at the same time. He nervously watched the changes in Ji Dong's face and felt the changes in the energy of the crystal crown in his body. He did not dare to input his own 3rd fire magic into Ji Dong's body, because that was something that Ji Dong could not bear. At this time, the energy of these two crystal crowns could only be absorbed by him. Hold on, the energy of the crystal crown is not only guiding the release of your own dual attributes, but also helping you to change your own physique. If you can't bear such a little pain, then why are you still a yin and yang magician? It will be fine in a while. A little pain? Was this a little pain? However, Ji Dong had no spare mind to think about this now. He could only feel that what Xia Tian said in a while was so long. Sweat turned into steam from Ji Dong's body, with a faint stench. There were indeed a lot of impurities in his body. At this time, under the calcination of the yin and yang double fire, the impurities were quickly purified. The scorching and warm energy swam faster and faster. Xia Tian clearly saw that the excited forehead began to gradually appear 2 points of starlight. Half a red crowned star and half a blue crowned star gradually formed and met in the middle of Ji Dong's forehead, combining into a half red and half blue crowned star. In the beginning, the color was still very light, but as the energy of the two crystal crowns gradually merged with Ji Dong's body, this special crowned star gradually became clear. There was a hint of joy in Xia Tian's eyes. He thought to himself, sure enough, it needs to be absorbed at the same time to be effective. With his yin and yang balanced body, the magic contained in these two crystal crowns was not wasted at all. Others were level 1/3 fire apprentices or level 1/4 fire apprentices, but he was good. He was a level 1/3 fire apprentice. Seeing that the crown star was gradually completed, Xia Tian was really looking forward to what it would be like if the child in front of him could really complete the condensation of the yin and yang crown. After all, with the yin and yang crown, it meant that he could become a real yin and yang magician. With the formation of the crown star, Ji Dong's expression gradually calmed down. The two raging energies gradually calmed down and slowly gathered in his chest. Ji Dong could feel that on both sides of his chest there was a light spot, the left was blue and the right was red. At the same time, he also found that when he concentrated, he seemed to be able to vaguely feel the same aura in the air, but it was much weaker than the two lights in his body. When he opened his eyes, he found that his third fire school uniform was completely soaked, and his whole body seemed to have just been fished out of the water. But with so much sweat, he did not feel tired at all. Instead, he felt that his whole body was full of strength. When he woke up, Ji Dong's whole body was full of a sense of strength, but the sense of strength on both sides of his body was different. The right half of his body seemed to be full of that kind of strong explosive power, while the left half of his body was tenacity and endurance. Since coming to the Five Elements continent, Ji Dong had been struggling in weakness. It was only in the past few days that he could eat his fill. At this time, after integrating the two crystal crowns, he really felt the existence of power again. His essence, qi, and spirit had also improved a lot. He was no longer in the state where he would feel tired after doing something. Looking at Xia Tian, Ji Dong said sincerely, "Thank you, teacher Xia Tian." Xia Tian waved his hand and said, "As I said, these two crystal crowns belong to the dean. If you want to thank someone, thank him. Now you have completed the first step of a yin and yang magician's cultivation. When you go back, you can look in the mirror. When you use your mind to control the third fire magic and fourth fire magic in your body, the crown star you have will appear on your forehead. They are all half, that is to say, you are now a level 1/3 fire magic apprentice." "Level 1 so quickly?" Ji Dong said in surprise. Xia Tian snorted and said, "This is your good luck. Without these two crystal crowns, I am afraid you will never be able to have these two types of magic, and it will not be so easy to improve in the future. Remember, when you cultivate, you must absorb the two types of magic at the same time, and the amount of absorption must be exactly the same, so that it will not affect your body. Otherwise, as long as any side of the magic is absorbed a little more, it will immediately be disturbed by your body's yin and yang balance characteristics, which is equivalent to doing useless work. Teacher Xia Tian, then how should I cultivate? Since I am already a level 1/3 fire magic apprentice, can you teach me the cultivation method first? Xia Tian snorted and said, haven't I already taught you? Sit cross-legged, relax your whole body, and use your mind to feel the two types of magic you have. The magic you have now, or rather, your own body is like a magnet. You have to use your mind to let them attract the third fire elements and fourth fire elements in the air. This is the cultivation method. The first 10 levels of yin and yang magician are the most difficult to cultivate. You can only rely on your own senses and mind to slowly condense. This process is long and boring. Many people fail to cultivate the yin-yang crown not because they don't have enough talent, but because they can't persevere in this monotonous process. With your dual elemental cultivation, your body's yin and yang balance, you have to put in far more effort than ordinary students. Thank you, teacher. I will remember your words and work harder than other students. I will use results to prove all this to you. Now, can I start your punishment? Xia Tian finally showed a smile on his face. From the fact that Ji Dong could still sit upright in that kind of pain without making a sound, he could see the child's determination. In addition, Ji Dong said that he was an orphan, which also made Xia Tian's resentment towards him for entering the academy through the back door lessen a lot. Forget about today's punishment. I will also take the opportunity to be lazy. You have just obtained level 1 magic. Go back and start cultivating. If you have any problems, come to me. I live in room 501 on the top floor of the 3rd Fire Academy dormitory. Go. Ji Dong stood up. He suddenly realized that he really liked this Li Hua Academy a little, and also liked this straightforward, blazing summer that couldn't be rubbed into the eyes of a fool. He bowed towards the summer before walking out. The sky gradually turned dark. With the appearance of the sunset, it was time for the day and night to change. In the president's office, Yang Bingtian welcomed a guest. Hello, President Yang. The guest was about 40 years old. He was slender and had bright eyes. He was wearing a red robe with a flame mark around a golden halo on his right chest. That didn't represent his strength, but his identity. Only the members of the Southern Fire Empire Yin and Yang Magician Guild would dress like this. Hello, please take a seat. Yang Bingtian invited the guest to sit on the sofa. President Yang, I am a staff member of the Empire Yin and Yang Magician Guild. This time, I was entrusted by the guild to bring you something. The president knows that you like to collect all kinds of Yin and Yang magician scrolls. The guild occasionally bought one from a down-and-out Yin and Yang magician. I can sell it to you at the original price. Yin and Yang magic scroll? Let me see. Yang Bingtian's eyes lit up. He hurriedly gestured for the guest to take out the scroll. If his greatest hobby in life was tasting good wine, then collecting Yin and Yang magic scrolls was second only to wine tasting. Yin and Yang magic scrolls were actually imprints of some Yin and Yang magic scrolls in special scrolls. Generally speaking, they were mainly supportive Yin and Yang magic scrolls because the attack and defense scrolls needed to store too much magic, so it was difficult to succeed. The method of making these scrolls had been lost. Therefore, the Yin and Yang magic scrolls that could be bought were almost all antique. Yang Bingtian didn't collect them to use, but to admire and study them. The middle-aged man raised his hand and touched the belt on his waist that was inlaid with a red gem. A scroll about a foot long appeared in his hand. He carefully held the scroll in front of Yang Bingtian. Seeing this scroll, Yang Bingtian's eyes lit up. He was a knowledgeable person. From the appearance of this scroll, he could tell how old it was. The entire body of the scroll was dark yellow, and it was unknown what material it was made of. There were fine dark lines on it, and there were also some special handwriting that didn't belong to the current era. In particular, the rich mana fluctuations released from it made people have no doubt about how powerful the yin-yang magic skill engraved on it was. The middle-aged man looked at Yang Bingtian's fondness for it. He smiled and said, after careful research by the guild, this scroll should have been made by a master who specialized in making yin and yang magic scrolls 1,000 years ago. It's called the omnidirectional amorphous teleportation scroll. The most peculiar thing about it is that it was made by infusing at least 5 types of yin and yang magic. It's extremely valuable as a collector. This is the omnidirectional amorphous teleportation scroll that's said to be the most useless, but it uses the principle of mutual promotion and restraint of the 5 elements to contain the most yin and yang magic. Chapter 11. The middle-aged man laughed and said, President Yang, you really are a collector of yin-yang magic scrolls. It seems that I don't need to introduce it to you. Yang Bingtian's eyes lit up and said, although this thing can't be used, its research value is extremely high. At least until now, there is no group in our yin and yang magician world that can use a magic combination made up of 5 kinds of magic. The middle-aged man said, in fact, it's not completely worthless. It can still save a life at a critical moment. Yang Bingtian laughed and said, do you dare to use it? This thing is known as the omnidirectional teleportation scroll. No one knows where it can teleport them to. Unless they are in a life and death crisis, they will only take the risk to try it. It doesn't matter if they are teleported far away, but if they are teleported to a high altitude and fall to their death, or be teleported to the depths of the earth to suffocate, isn't it the same as suicide? But don't worry, I am very interested in this thing. How much is it? The middle-aged man stretched out a finger and said, 1,000 gold coins. 1,000 gold coins? Yang Bingtian was stunned and said, what's the difference between this and giving it away for free? I'm not the only one who collects yin-yang magic scrolls. This thing is a rare antique. To say that it is only 1,000 years old is the lowest estimate. If it is taken to the auction house, it is normal to sell it for 100,000 gold coins. The middle-aged man smiled and said, this is the guild's order. Moreover, you are also a member of the guild. How can we let an outsider take advantage of it? The guild leader said it is 1,000 gold coins. Since you have paid so much, it is yours. Yang Bingtian was moved and shook his head helplessly. He said, that old guy asked you to give me something good that I can't refuse. Tell me, what does he want me to do? The middle-aged man walked to Yang Bingtian and whispered something in his ear. After listening to his words, Yang Bingtian said, I knew it was this thing. All right, go back and tell him that I will think about it. But I'm afraid I can't do it in the next few years. Wait a little longer. The middle-aged man said, Mr. President said that this is also the honor of the Southern Fire Empire Yin and Yang Magician Guild. Please think it over. Yang Bingtian nodded thoughtfully. The middle-aged man had achieved his goal, so he respectfully said, then I will take my leave. Yang Bingtian placed the scroll on the table and gestured for her to leave. Let's go. I'll send you off. The middle-aged man said, there's no need to trouble yourself. Aren't you going to keep this scroll? Yang Bingtian smiled. No matter what, you're a representative of the guild, so it's only right for me to send you off. I'll have to take a closer look at this scroll when I get back. Now that I've obtained such a good item, I'll have to study it. No one will come to my place. As for the 1,000 gold, you can ask the guild leader to deduct it from my guild benefit. I haven't received any benefits from the guild in a while. The middle-aged man just smiled and said nothing more. He walked out accompanied by Yang Bingtian. Not long after they went out, the door of Yang Bingtian's office opened with a rhythmic knock. President Yang, are you there? A head poked in from outside. The one who poked his head in was none other than Ji Dong, who had become a level 1 dual-fire apprentice. After returning from teacher Xia Tian's place, Ji Dong was always excited. After returning to his room, he took a bath. He wanted to immediately begin to feel the existence of the 3rd fire magic and 4th fire magic, but because he had spent a lot of time absorbing the 2 crystal crowns, it was almost evening. The other students would have already returned to their dormitories or gone for dinner. The huge physical consumption made him hungry. But Ji Dong remembered the benefits that the 2 crystal crowns had brought him, so he decided to mix today's wine for Yang Bingtian before going to eat. So he took a bath and began to mix the wine. As the saying goes, don't forget the one who dug the well when you drink water. Yang Bingtian gave him the 2 precious crystal crowns, and Ji Dong had a good impression of him. Coupled with today's breakthrough in physical strength and the transformation of the dual fire magic on his body, his physical strength had improved a lot. Therefore, the wine he made today could be said to be the peak of what he could do in his current physical state. To Ji Dong's surprise, when it was time to drink, Yang Bingtian did not go to his place to find him. How could he know that it was because Yang Bingtian had a guest? They lived on the same floor and were separated by only one room. Naturally, he came to find Yang Bingtian with the wine. As Yang Bingtian was used to living alone on the top floor, he had forgotten about Ji Dong, the young bartender who had just arrived. Ji Dong came to the door of Yang Bingtian's room and knocked. The door was not closed. Although he did not knock hard, it still opened. He poked his head out and saw that Yang Bingtian was not outside. So, Ji Dong simply walked in. "President Yang, are you here?" Ji Dong carefully held the glass of wine with his left hand. This glass of wine was at least 30% to 40% of the wine he had been at his peak in his previous life. It was a glass of golden red wine. A rich fruity aroma rippled over the mouth of the glass, but there was not a trace of the smell of wine. From the cautiousness with which Ji Dong held the glass, it could be seen that it was rare. Not only in terms of the ingredients but also in the technique. Ji Dong called out twice but did not hear any response. He could not help but feel a little strange. President Yang is also an old drunkard. Could it be that he has forgotten the time to drink? Forget it, put the wine on his table and wait for him to drink when he comes back. While thinking, Ji Dong came to the table. Just as he was about to put down the glass of wine in his hand, he saw the simple scroll on the table. He was now a level 1 Bing Ding twin fire apprentice and had some ability to sense the yin and yang magic. He immediately found that the scroll was filled with magic as vast as the ocean. What's going on? In the eyes of Ji Dong, the scroll in front of him was like a unique painting from his motherland in his previous life. It was called a traditional painting. After painting a traditional painting, in order to preserve it, it had to be mounted on a scroll. Although he was not familiar with the patterns on the scroll in front of him, the style was no different from a traditional painting scroll. Since it was just a painting, why would it have the fluctuation of yin and yang magic? Driven by curiosity, Ji Dong held the wine glass in one hand and the scroll in the other. With a shake of his hand, he opened the omnidirectional teleportation scroll left behind from ancient times. In Ji Dong's eyes, this was just a painting. Driven by curiosity, he wanted to see what this painting actually had the fluctuation of yin and yang magic. However, how could he have thought that it was this scroll in front of him that changed his fate after coming to this world? A strong yin and yang magic erupted almost in an instant. Green, red, yellow, white, black, 5 colors of light erupted almost in an instant. The terrifying magic not only caused the entire Fire Academy to tremble, but also spread to every corner of Fire City. All the yin and yang magicians in Fire City looked in the direction of the Fire Academy at almost the same time. Such a huge magic fluctuation was almost equivalent to the yin and yang magic used by a 6-crown Heavenly Knight powerhouse. The moment the scroll opened, Ji Dong found that he could not move. The scroll in his hand also disappeared in an instant, turning into dazzling 5-colored lights that surrounded his body in the center. Then, thousands of complex symbols seemed to have come to life and filled the entire room. The terrifying yin and yang magic made the 2 points of yang and yang magic that had just condensed in Ji Dong's chest tremble violently, as if it could be extinguished at any time. What is going on? Ji Dong knew that he had made a mistake. Before this, he had only seen Yang Bingtian, Xia Tian, and Qiu Tian release the yin and yang magic. Now that he was really inside it, he could deeply feel how terrifying the yin and yang magic was. However, although the 5 energies were huge, they did not cause him any harm. Apart from being unable to move, he did not feel any pain. The strange symbols around him began to quickly integrate into the 5-colored energy, and the 5-colored energy also began to rotate, turning into a huge vortex that moved around Ji Dong's body. There were only these strange 5 colors around him, and Ji Dong only felt that everything around him had become illusory. At first, he could still vaguely see the scene in the room outside through these lights, but gradually, all he could see and feel was the 5-colored brilliance. He felt that his body seemed to be falling from a high altitude, and the strong sense of weightlessness made his heart jump to his throat, but his body was always motionless, and even the glass of wine in his hand did not ripple. The 5-colored light suddenly converged, and the huge magic disappeared in an instant. Fire City became quiet again, as if nothing had happened before. Yang Bingtian had just sent the middle-aged man from the Yin and Yang Magician Guild to the entrance of the academy when he suddenly felt the incomparably huge magic fluctuations. He was shocked and turned to look in the direction of the 3rd Fire Department's teaching building, just in time to see his room blooming with 5 colors. "Not good," Yang Bingtian exclaimed. He couldn't care less about the middle-aged man beside him. He turned and ran in the direction of the teaching building. The middle-aged man naturally realized something and quickly followed. When they returned to the door of Yang Bingtian's office, Xia Tian, Qiu Tian, and other academy teachers had gathered here. "Dean, what happened just now? Did you break through to the 6th crown?" Xia Tian asked curiously. Although the huge yin and yang magic fluctuations attracted them, because the magic was only a flash and did not cause any damage, the teachers were not too surprised. They only felt a little strange when they saw Yang Bingtian rushing back from outside. Yang Bingtian did not answer Xia Tian's words. He pushed the door open and quickly walked in. As he expected, the omnidirectional teleportation scroll that he had previously placed on the desk had disappeared into thin air, and there was no other change in the room. Xia Tian was obviously the most impatient one. After following in, he couldn't help but ask, "Dean, what happened?" Yang Bingtian stood in front of the table and pondered for a moment before turning to the teachers and said, "Nothing, it should be a yin and yang magic scroll that I collected was damaged, and the magic inside was released. Fortunately, it did not cause any damage. It's getting late, everyone go back to rest." The teachers naturally would not question Yang Bingtian's words. Seeing that there was nothing else, they said goodbye to Yang Bingtian and left. Only Xia Tian stayed. The middle-aged man from the Southern Fire Empire Yin and Yang Magician Guild couldn't help but say, "President Yang, it can't be that the scroll broke by itself. Before I brought it here, the guild checked it carefully." Yang Bingtian nodded and sighed. "I know it's not that the scroll broke by itself. It's all my fault, I forgot someone. Alright, you should also leave first. No matter what, I will remember this scroll. When you go back, you don't need to tell the president that the scroll has been used. Just say that I accepted it." The middle-aged man was obviously relieved. Afraid that Yang Bingtian would regret it, he hurriedly said, "President Yang, then I will take my leave first." This time, Yang Bingtian did not say that he would see him off, and the middle-aged man also tactfully left. At this time, only Xia Tian and Yang Bingtian were left in the office. "Teacher, what is going on?" Xia Tian waited until no one was around before asking again. His expression also became much more respectful. Without a doubt, he was the only disciple that Yang Bingtian had mentioned. Yang Bingtian smiled bitterly. "I forgot about that child Ji Dong. Sigh, it's all my fault." "Ji Dong? What does this have to do with Ji Dong?" Xia Tian said doubtfully. "I helped him absorb the 2 crystal crowns you gave me today. He has successfully become a level 1 apprentice with 2 element. He was with me just now. Yang Bingtian said helplessly, "That's right. That person just now came from the guild. It was the guild president who gave me an omnidirectional indefinite teleportation scroll. I forgot that Jidong is also staying on this floor with me. At this time, only he would come to my room to deliver wine. You also know that the yin-yang magic scroll has an inexplicable attraction to the yin and yang magician. Since Jidong already has the abilities of a level 1 apprentice, he would naturally be attracted to it. This child probably doesn't even know what a yin-yang magic scroll is. The mana fluctuations just now should have been caused by him opening the scroll out of curiosity. This is troublesome. I don't know where this child has been teleported to." Xia Tian said in shock, "Teacher, why did you let Jidong stay here? He is only a student. He should be staying in a student's dormitory. What is going on? Could it be that you are going to accept a little disciple for me?" Yang Bingtian smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, "Come, let's go to Jidong's room. If he isn't here, then my judgment is correct. The omnidirectional indefinite teleportation scroll can send him to any corner of the continent. It can even send him to the sky or underground. Right now, I can only pray for this child and hope that he is fine." Chapter 12. Green, red, yellow, white, and black, the 5-colored light blended into a huge vortex. Although there was no pain, but being in it, Jidong inevitably had a sense of panic. No one would feel comfortable when their fate was not in their own hands. If he was really only a 10-year-old child, perhaps he would have been scared out of his wits at this time. Fortunately, with the memory of his previous life, after a short period of panic, Jidong quickly calmed down. He more or less knew a little about psychology, so he kept giving himself psychological hints. Anyway, his life was picked up from the ground. He had transmigrated to the 5 elements continent, and now he was enveloped by the light released by this unknown painting scroll. At most, he would die. Perhaps it would be another transmigration. It seemed that only a moment had passed, but it also seemed that thousands of years had passed. Suddenly, the feeling of his feet on the ground came, and then the 5-colored light around his body faded. Before Jidong could react, an unparalleled scorching airflow wrapped his body in an instant. The feeling of blazing heat made Jidong feel that his body seemed to emit a burnt smell. In his chest, the red and blue lights seemed to be ignited under the effect of this blazing energy. The light shone brightly, and on Jidong's forehead, the half-red and half-blue royal star also appeared. In the afternoon, after absorbing the 2 crystal crowns, Jidong had vaguely felt the existence of subtle C and D fire magic in the air, but at this time, it appeared very clearly in his mind. Under the guidance of the 2 magic points that belonged to him on his chest, Jidong only felt that his body was surrounded by an incomparably solid C and D fire magic, and its magnitude even exceeded that of the 2 teachers, Xia Tian and Qiu Tian, when they released their respective yin and yang crowns. What is this place? Under the great shock, Jidong opened his eyes in the heat that made his body feel like it was about to melt. Everything in sight was fiery red. The surrounding air was completely distorted due to the high temperature. The terrifying temperature existed in every corner of the surroundings. In the distorted air, Jidong sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, the only thing he could think of was the word luck. What he saw in front of him was actually a large magma lake. From where he was standing, he was less than a meter away from the magma lake in front of him. This huge magma lake was actually boundless, like a sea of flames. This place was more like a huge karst cave, but it was a karst cave with no end. And the place where Jidong stood at this time was the edge of the magma lake, in a sunken rock wall. Although his position was still 100 meters away from the magma lake, the scorching temperature made him feel that he might melt at any time. The air was so hot that even breathing was extremely difficult. The burnt smell of the school uniform on his body was getting stronger and stronger. Even his hair and eyebrows were a little curly. What is that picture scroll? Why did I come to such a place like a fiery hell after opening the scroll? At this time, behind Ji-dong was a rock wall, and in front of him was the magma lake. It could be said that it was difficult to move an inch, and the two weak masses of third fire element and fourth fire element in his chest became particularly clear at this moment. He did not need to deliberately feel it at all. The third fire element and fourth fire element from the outside world would automatically drill into his body through his skin. Of course, this was a completely corrosive kind of drilling, and with his current cultivation of a level 1 apprentice, it was simply not enough to absorb this incomparably pure and extremely large amount of energy. Ji-dong vaguely felt that if it were not for his own fire attribute physique and the fact that he had become a level 1 fire element apprentice, perhaps his body would not be able to withstand it now. But even so, he kept feeling that his body was getting hotter and hotter. Perhaps it would not take long for him to be roasted into a jerky by the rolling heat rising from the magma below. Ji-dong never regretted his actions. What he wanted to know the most now was why this situation happened. At the same time, he felt a little sad in his heart. He just thought that everything had to start from scratch, and he had finally embarked on the road of this new identity, but he encountered such a thing. At this moment, a rich fragrance entered his nostrils. The fruity aroma and the wine aroma blended together, rippling around him. Only then did Ji-dong realize that he was still holding the cocktail made for Yang Bingtian in his hand. Unfortunately, at this time, under such a high temperature, the cocktail was evaporating very quickly. Seeing that half of the glass had already turned into mist, that was where the rich fragrance came from. With a self-deprecating smile, Ji-dong brought the glass closer to his eyes. In his heart, he thought that no matter what, it was not too bad to be able to drink a glass of his own wine before he died. Just as he was about to drink the wine in front of him, suddenly, a strange scene happened. A faint red light came to his face, and Ji-dong only felt that his body seemed to be light. The heat that almost roasted him into a jerky suddenly disappeared, and his own magic could not even feel the existence of the fire elements in the third and fourth fire elements. What was even more strange was that the remaining half of the wine in the glass also disappeared at the same time as the heat disappeared, as if it was swept away by the red light. "It can't be? You're not even willing to give me the last drink before you die?" Ji-dong felt a burst of anger in his heart. Looking in front of him, he found that the periphery of the depression he was in seemed to be covered with a layer of red light that was like a thin veil. It was this light that seemed as thin as a cicada's wing that completely blocked the temperature outside, and could no longer affect him. Without the high-temperature baking, Ji-dong's mind also became a little clearer. He fixed his eyes on the outside of the red light, and his eyes immediately stared straight at it. Ji-dong would never forget what he saw at this moment for the rest of his life. He saw that in the magma lake that was constantly bubbling at an unknown temperature, a huge magma erupted like a water column. This fire column erupted to the height of his body, and stopped 20 meters in front of him. At the top of the fire column, there was a white and tender hand. The slender fingers were like scallions, and the skin was as white as snow. It formed a sharp contrast with the bursting magma flames around it. Looking at this hand, Ji-dong thought of a kind of food, almond tofu. It was so white and tender that it seemed like it would drip water at any time. Following closely behind it was a smooth jade arm, and the color was exactly the same as the hand. Even with Ji-dong's picky eyes, he absolutely couldn't find any flaws. He saw the arm gently swing in the air, and the palm made a grabbing action. Then, there was a small ball in her palm. The ball was golden red in color. Seeing that color, Ji-dong suddenly came to a realization. Wasn't this the wine he brewed? And from the looks of it, not only his remaining half-cup, but the part that had evaporated in the air earlier had also condensed into this small ball. The arm rose in the magma, and gradually revealed the body of its owner. A young girl slowly climbed up from the magma fire column and appeared at the top. The liquid magma was like a small platform supporting her body. Seeing this girl, Ji Dong was completely stunned. In his previous life, Ji Dong was still a virgin until the moment he died drunk. However, that wasn't because he didn't like women, or because he had any physiological problems, but because he pursued perfection too much. He was a typical perfectionist, and it was because of this pursuit of perfection that he could achieve great results in the wine industry. But it was also because of this that although he had seen countless beautiful women, he had never found a perfect one that could win his heart. Ji Dong never thought that the perfection that he had sought for so long in his previous life would actually be found by his 10-year-old body after he came to this world that belonged to the 5 elements continent. Yes, other than perfection, he really couldn't think of another word to describe what he was seeing. The girl that appeared at the top of the magma fire column looked to be around 18 or 19 years old. She had a head of fiery red long hair that draped over her back, just past her buttocks, and an exquisite and perfect face that even the best sculptor wouldn't be able to portray. The perfect proportion of her body was also completely in line with the golden ratio, without a trace of excess fat, and not a single flaw could be found. She had a pair of large, pitch-black eyes that seemed to be able to see through a person's heart. From top to bottom, there were only 3 balls of flames that covered the 3 most private parts of the woman. The exposed skin was exactly the same as the first part of her arms, sparkling and tender. This was a masterpiece of the heavens. Ji Dong originally didn't have any faith, but at this moment, he believed that there must be the existence of God in this world. Apart from God, who else could create such a perfect body? At first glance, Ji Dong found that he had already fallen in love with this girl. No external factors could stop his love for perfection. In the past, Ji Dong had only heard of lotus flowers rising from the water, but this girl that rose from the magma was like a red lotus rising from the flames. She was so sudden and shocking that the moment he saw her, Ji Dong's gaze was already infatuated. The girl looked curiously at the golden red ball of water in her hand. She brought it to her nose and sniffed it carefully. Then, she gently inhaled, and the golden red wine turned into a stream of water and quietly entered her mouth. Looking at the pink and tender lips opening and closing, Ji Dong only felt his nose heat up, and unexpectedly, a nosebleed came out. At this moment there was only one thought in his mind. If he could kiss those lips, even if he had to die immediately, he would be willing. It was just like how he disregarded everything in his previous life to taste the 1,000-year-old wine. Even if he died, he would have no regret. Oh! The girl let out a soft groan. Her big black eyes slowly closed, and her long eyelashes rested on her eyelids. It was indescribably moving. Her white and tender face had 2 more heart-stirring blush, as if she was enjoying it very much. "Can you tell me, what is this?" The girl's voice echoed in the air, as if it came from all directions at the same time, but Ji Dong just didn't see her speak. "This is a type of wine," Ji Dong subconsciously replied, but the girl's voice also woke him up from his intoxication. Although he still couldn't bear to look away, his mind was much clearer. He asked, "What is this place?" The girl didn't answer his question. She slowly opened her eyes, wrinkled her cute little nose and said, "That's not right. I've drunk the wine of you humans. Although it's also very tasty, it doesn't taste like this. Let me think, this wine has the taste of oranges, almonds, and lemons from your human world. There are also 2 other tastes that I can't taste. Perhaps I haven't eaten it before. I will definitely remember the taste of things I've eaten before." Ji Dong was shocked and said, "You're not a human." The girl smiled slightly, and cupped some of the magma below her with both hands, letting the terrifyingly hot liquid flow through her fingers. She said, "Do you think a human can do this? You still haven't answered my question. What was that I drank just now?" Ji Dong took a deep breath, calmed his surging emotions and said, "This is really wine. It's just a type of cocktail that I made myself. It's normal that you haven't drunk it before, because in our human world, only I can make this kind of wine. Do you want to know its name? The girl nodded impatiently and said, "Of course." At the mention of wine, the feeling of inferiority he felt when he saw the perfect girl immediately faded from Ji Dong's heart, and his confident gaze once again appeared in his eyes. It's called Midnight Sunlight. It's made with 4/10 of vodka, 2/10 of Cointreau, 2/10 of almond brandy, 1/10 of red pomegranate pulp, and 1/10 of lemon juice. The taste you didn't taste should be pure wine and red pomegranate pulp. When I first made it, this glass of Midnight Sunlight should be made up of 3 colors: black, golden red, and blood red, because these 3 colors represent the sinful night, the beautiful sunlight, and the heat of sunlight. Later on, I felt that these colors were meaningless, because colors can never represent a person's heart. So, I used a special method to fuse these 3 colors together, retaining the most golden red color, and turned it into a brand new glass of Midnight Sunlight. I hope that the person who drinks it will be able to feel a trace of warmth in the heart of a lonely person. Wine has feelings, and only when one can taste the emotions in the bartender's heart can it be considered a real cocktail. So, what I made is not wine, but feelings. Midnight Sunlight is an impossible beauty. It can intoxicate a person, make a person confused, and make a person disappointed. If you can experience these 3 feelings and then taste the warmth, then my glass of wine has found its owner. Chapter 13. The young lady listened quietly to Ji Dong's explanation. She seemed to be immersed in it as she muttered to herself, "So this is what wine is like. I really felt what you said just now. It's really delicious. However, I think your explanation is even better than this glass of wine." Ji Dong came back to his senses. He was surprised by what he had just said. When he was mixing wine for Yang Bingtian, he would always pass the wine to Yang Bingtian after he was done mixing. He would never say so much. However, he was filled with the desire to show off in front of this perfect young lady. At that moment, he seemed to have returned to the time when he was the god of wine. Collecting his thoughts, Ji Dong said, "I've answered your question. Now, can you tell me what this place is? And who are you?" The young lady smiled sweetly and said, "I haven't seen a human for a long time. I'm also very curious. You're so weak, how did you come to my place? This is the Earth's core. My name is Flaming Bar." Flaming Bar? Ji Dong frowned and shook his head. "This name isn't good. It doesn't suit you. Flaming Bar is violent and violent. However, you don't give me that feeling." Flaming Bar smiled. "Don't you humans have a saying, 'Don't judge a book by its cover'? Moreover, I'm not human. You haven't seen my violent and violent side. Naturally, you won't understand the meaning of my name. All the underground creatures call me the Queen of the Flaming Bar. However, based on your explanation of the wine just now, I'll allow you to call me by my name." Ji Dong was shocked to discover that at this moment, the temperament of raging flames had undergone an earth-shattering change. The girl who was as delicate as water before now had the charm of a monarch descending upon the world. The invisible pressure caused the boundless magma lake below to quiet down. Not even a single bubble dared to rise. However, Ji Dong was not afraid of the Flaming Bar's change. In his eyes, this was just the sublimation of the Flaming Bar's perfection. Perhaps this was the feeling of loving someone. No matter what happened to her, she would always be perfect in his heart. "You said this is the Earth's core? And what underground creatures? I don't understand," Ji Dong said doubtfully. Raging Flame smiled and said, "You human child, your words are really interesting. You're clearly only about 10 years old, but you have the tone of an adult, and you even know how to make such delicious wine. For you to be able to come here, we can be considered to have some fate. Today, I'll make an exception and talk to you." As she spoke, Raging Flames stood on top of the pillar of magma, spinning quietly on one leg as if she was dancing. A fiery red dress had already wrapped around her alluring body. Although the dress was unadorned, it was still so beautiful on her body. Ji Dong only felt his body lighten. Before he could react, his body had already flown out uncontrollably, floating above the magma lake with a cry of surprise. Around his body, the light red barrier from before had already formed a sphere, and just like that, he was carried to the front of raging flames. Little human child, don't be afraid. Without my permission, nothing will hurt you here. Flaming Bar's voice returned to its original gentleness. The majesty of an emperor was nowhere to be seen. You must have never heard of this place. I'm afraid not many of you humans know of its existence. There's a group of underground creatures that are different from the creatures on the surface. There are a total of 18 layers underground. The outermost layer of the underground creatures are weaker. It's not easy for you humans to know about the outermost layers. However, be it humans or us, the underground creatures, we all live on this planet together. Planet, do you understand? Ji Dong nodded and said, I understand. The planet we live on is only a small part of the universe. It rotates on its own and orbits the sun. Could it be that this is the planet's core? Flaming Bar was stunned. Universe? What's that? I don't know, but you seem to know a lot of things. It's not wrong to call this the Earth's core because this is the 18th layer underground. It's also the center of the planet. Ji Dong said, so you're saying that you're the strongest existence among the underground creatures? Flaming Bar chuckled. I don't know about that. It's just that I'm the only one here at the Earth's core lake. I'll occasionally go to your human world to take a look. It's just that I'm prone to danger when I'm in your human world. It's been a long time since I've been there. Ji Dong looked at the strange shield around his body. He looked at Flaming Bar, who was standing on the magma. He could not help but ask, You're so strong yet you're afraid of danger? Flaming Bar said mysteriously, Little child, this is a secret. I can't tell you. Ji Dong said helplessly, Can you not call me little child? I have a name. My name is Ji Dong. Flaming Bar thought about it. Then I'll call you Ji Dong. Ji Dong smiled wryly. Can't you use the word little? Flaming Bar chuckled. His smile was like a blooming spring flower. Ji Dong felt his nose heat up again. He said, You're already small. Why won't you let me call you that? Don't you like your name? Then should I call you Little Ji? Or Little Dong T? You should just call me Ji Dong. Flaming Bar laughed as if he had gotten his way. Ji Dong, how did you get here? You should know that not just anyone can come here. Ji Dong shook her head and said, I don't know why I'm here either. I just opened a scroll, and then a 5-colored light enveloped my body. I felt like I was constantly falling, and when the light dissipated, I found myself here. Scroll? It should be a scroll. It must be a yin-yang magic skill scroll made by you humans. A yin-yang magic skill scroll of the 5 elements. It's quite troublesome to make. Judging from the energy fluctuation when you arrived here, it wasn't a teleportation scroll. It should be a random teleportation scroll. To be able to teleport you to a depth of 10,000 miles underground, the magic contained in this scroll is quite strong. Ji Dong was shocked. Yin-yang magic skill scroll? What's that? Can I still go back? Flaming Bar pulled his long red hair from his back and played with it in front of his chest. He thought for a while before saying, Ji Dong, why don't we make a deal? The wine you make is very good. If you can bring me wine often, I'll help you return to the human world. What do you think? All right, no problem. Ji Dong agreed without hesitation. What made him feel strange was that he didn't make this decision so quickly because he could return to the human world. It was more because he wanted to see Flaming Bar again in the future. However, your wine must be good. You must tell me stories about the human world. It's too lonely here, and I can't leave easily. If your wine doesn't taste good, I'll get angry. If I get angry, I might even throw you into the Earth's core lake. Flaming Bar's threat wasn't scary at all. She was still smiling. Looking at her, Ji Dong came back to his senses and said, I've never thought that death is something to be afraid of. No guarantee is better than the truth, don't you think? Hearing Ji Dong's words, Flaming Bar laughed again. Her body trembled as she laughed. Even though her body was covered by her red dress, her alluring figure was still breathtaking. Ji Dong thought that he had a strong will, but once he focused on Flaming Bar, his heart seemed to be no longer controlled by his will. You're such an interesting little fella. You're just a kid, but you insist on speaking like an adult. However, I'm really happy to see you today. Come, let me take a closer look. Ji Dong only saw a blur in front of his eyes. The red barrier of light he was in suddenly increased in size. Raging flames, who had been standing on the magma pillar, had already appeared in front of him. A pair of large black eyes looked at his face half a foot in front of him. Ji Dong could clearly feel the Flaming Bar's warm breath. There was a special smell in her breath. It was a little fiery and tranquil. It also had a bit of the fruity fragrance of the midnight sunshine. It was more of the purest smell of fresh air, and even a little of the fragrance of moist plant. In this scorching world, suddenly smelling such an unforgettable fragrance, Ji Dong was completely intoxicated. Her big black eyes were like two deep whirlpools, firmly sucking in his gaze and his heart. Flaming Bar raised her hand and caressed Ji Dong's head. She exclaimed softly, Yin and Yang balance. How strange. You humans actually have a Yin and Yang balance constitution? And it's an absolute Yin and Yang balance. There's not a single difference. Flaming Bar's voice was pleasant to listen to. Hearing her speak at such a close distance and smelling her breath, Ji Dong was intoxicated. He didn't even hear what Flaming Bar said. Hey Ji Dong, what are you thinking about? Flaming Bar raised her hand and lightly knocked on his head. Instantly, a warm current flowed through the yin-yang crowned star on his head. Ji Dong felt his body suddenly heat up, as if a layer of steam was emitted from his body. It was indescribably comfortable. The 2 points of dual fire mana in his chest lit up, and his mind became extremely clear. It was as if Flaming Bar's knock had knocked away all the distracting thoughts in his mind. Ji Dong, why do you have a yin and yang balance constitution? It seems like you're a human's level 1 apprentice. It's my first time seeing a human with yin and yang fire element. I think I'm even more interested in you now. Ji Dong said, Isn't yin and yang balance the trashiest constitution? You have to put in 32 times the effort of others to become a true yin and yang magician. I was born with yin and yang balance. What did you say? Raging Flame frowned and the smile on her pretty face disappeared. Her entire body once again released the majesty of an emperor. Feeling the aura on her body at such a close distance, Ji Dong was immediately oppressed to the point of being unable to breathe. His entire body was stuck to the red light barrier, and all the bones in his body seemed to be crushed. Oh, I'm sorry. Flaming Bar reacted, and the pressure disappeared. Ji Dong's body instantly went limp. Flaming Bar raised her hand and pulled him up. A warm current flowed from Flaming Bar's hand into Ji Dong's body. He instantly felt much better. Flaming Bar said apologetically, I didn't do it on purpose. It's just that you said yin and yang balance is the trashiest constitution. It made me a little angry because I also have yin and yang fire element. As she spoke, she held Ji Dong's hand and stood side by side with him. She didn't do anything, but the magma pillar that carried her suddenly turned into 2 huge flames that soared into the sky. The world in front of Ji Dong's eyes instantly turned into 2 colors. One side was pure white and the other was deep black. The black and white flames were clearly separated. You also have the yin and ding fire physique? Ji Dong looked at Flaming Bar in surprise. Flaming Bar nodded and said, That's why I said we're really fated. Who said that our dual elemental balance is trash? You humans only pursue a one-sided cultivation method. You think that as long as you have yin and yang in your body, you won't be affected. However, solitary yang doesn't grow, and solitary yin doesn't grow. If you really want to understand an elemental ability, you have to have both yin and yang. So what if you cultivate slowly? Don't you humans have combination skills? If you can cultivate dual yin and yang magician, you'll be able to use combination skills on your own. You won't need anyone's help at all. Jidong said, right now I just want to condense my own yin and yang crown and become a yin and yang magician first. Thank you for giving me confidence. I'll work hard. Flaming Bar thought about it and said, since you and I both have yin and yang fire elemental balance, how about this? From now on, you bring me wine here every day. I'll allow you to cultivate here for 6 hours. You're cultivating here? Jidong asked in surprise. Flaming Bar nodded and said, if you cultivate here, you'll be able to get rid of the 32 times difference. At least your progress won't be slower than a normal person. Even if you rent my place, you can use the wine you make to pay for the rent. Hearing Flaming Bar say that, Jidong was instantly overjoyed. To him, this was the best news. Not only would he have the chance to become a yin and yang magician, he would also be able to see his dream lover every day. What could be better than the perfect Flaming Bar? Flaming Bar smiled and said, you can start cultivating now. I won't help you increase your strength. How you cultivate is up to you. Jidong said, letting me cultivate here is already the biggest help you can give me. If I still can't achieve anything, then I can only blame myself. However, I can't stay here anymore today. I opened President Yang's scroll, so I have to go back and explain it to him. From tomorrow onwards, I'll come here every day. Is that okay?